Meeting the perfect stranger. Have you ever met a stranger who didn't feel strange at all? Someone whose voice carried the tone of an old memory, even though you're certain you've never met them before? They smile, and something unexplainable stirs in your chest. Not attraction, not recognition, but a strange kind of relief. As if your soul just exhaled, whispering, "There you are. I've been waiting." It's uncanny. They say the mind is a pattern-seeking machine, so maybe it's just coincidence, a trick of emotional resonance, or the comfort of familiar archetypes. But that doesn't explain everything, does it? Not the way you already know what they're about to say. Not the way they finish a sentence that never left your mouth. Not the way your body reacts like it's remembering something the brain can't retrieve. Maybe it's not déjà vu. Maybe it's precognition. Or maybe, just maybe, the timeline isn't as linear as we pretend it is, and that perfect stranger is someone your subconscious already met in a dream you forgot, a lifetime ago, or a version of yourself that existed in a different possibility. These encounters leave a mark. You walk away different, shaken, not by fear, but by the tremor of something brushing against your timeline that wasn't supposed to be there. Some call it fate, others call it a glitch. But when you look into the eyes of someone you've never seen, and they feel like home, how do you explain that? There are thousands of stories like this. A man boards a plane, sits beside a woman, and by the end of the flight, it feels like they've known each other for decades. They speak in sync. They share scars that mirror each other. They laugh at the same hidden rhythm. And then, just like that, they part ways and never meet again. But something has shifted inside them, permanently. Or a child meets an elderly person at a bus stop and instantly clings to them, calling them a name from a past life. The elderly person cries, not out of fear, but because that name belonged to someone they lost long ago. What force orchestrates that moment? Is it madness or memory bleeding through dimensions? Maybe these strangers are echoes, pieces of the same soul split across timelines. Maybe you meet them not for romance or friendship, but because the universe is reminding you of who you are beneath the roles. In that moment, it isn't about meeting someone else. It's about meeting the version of yourself that trusts, that believes, that remembers what it means to be seen. Some psychologists call this phenomenon soul resonance. It's the idea that certain people vibrate at a frequency that harmonizes with yours, not by design, not by effort, but by some deeper symmetry. You don't need a backstory. You don't need shared history. All you need is a moment, and that moment expands time. You might spend only minutes with them, but those minutes echo louder than years. You might never know their full name, but you'll remember how their presence felt like standing in the middle of a song you forgot you loved. Is it spiritual? Scientific? Is there a hidden map of quantum entanglement between minds who were always meant to cross paths? Or is the universe simply playful, throwing two kindred flames together, watching what burns and what remains? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. These encounters change you. They crack open a door you didn't know was sealed, and once it opens, nothing is ever quite the same. You start seeing more, feeling more, noticing the small signs, the street names, the time on the clock, the repeated numbers, the strange coincidences that don't feel like coincidences anymore. Because when you've met a perfect stranger who felt like destiny rehearsed their arrival, the world starts to shimmer just a little differently. You begin to wonder if every person you meet has a hidden thread leading back to you, if every handshake is a reconnection, if every goodbye is just a pause before the next crossing, and maybe the real question isn't who they are. Maybe the question is, who do you become after meeting them? Do you let the moment pass, call it random, and forget? Or do you carry the imprint forward, letting it reshape the way you walk through the world? Because somewhere, out there, you are someone else's perfect stranger too. And one day when they look at you and feel that same impossible familiarity, the loop will complete. The memory will catch up to the moment, and both of you will finally understand. It was never just a meeting, it was a return. Hearing your name alone. Imagine this. You're sitting in your room, the hum of appliances in the background, the stillness wrapping around you like a soft blanket. You're not expecting anyone. The door is shut. The phone is silent. And yet, somewhere behind you, or beside you, or above you, it speaks. A voice. Not loud, not whispering, just familiar enough to make your breath catch. It says your name, just your name. And when you turn, no one is there. For a single moment, your heart skips, your skin tightens, and reality stutters, because something impossible just happened, and it knew who you were. This moment, as brief and surreal as it is, has happened to countless people around the world. Across cultures, ages, backgrounds, this same eerie experience of hearing one's name in an empty room. Psychologists call it an auditory hallucination, and they'll explain it away with neural misfirings, memory loops, stress responses. But if you've ever heard it yourself, you know it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels intentional. In the mechanics of the brain, hearing your name is one of the most powerful stimuli. From birth, your name is a sonic anchor, shaping your attention, your identity, your very sense of self. It activates unique neural pathways, lighting up parts of the brain responsible for self-awareness. When spoken by others, it slices through noise like a beacon. You could be in a crowded stadium and still pick it out. But when you hear it alone, in silence, your brain has no logical context to contain it. So it creates one. Or perhaps it lets something else slip through. There are theories, some psychological, some spiritual, some that wander into the shadows of the unexplained. One suggests it's a type of subconscious echo, that your brain replays familiar patterns, and your name, so deeply encoded, is prone to emerging in moments of quiet. Especially when you're alone, overstimulated, or under pressure. The mind, seeking familiarity, creates the illusion of another presence, a ghost voice stitched from your own neurons. But other theories don't let it go so easily. Some suggest it's a glitch in consciousness itself, a place where thought and reality briefly overlap, a loop where time folds, or another layer of you, past or future, accidentally calls out. Imagine two versions of you, existing on slightly different frequencies, momentarily touching, one whispering your name without even knowing it. A collision of timelines so subtle, only your ears catch the tremor. In folklore, hearing your name called by an invisible presence has often been a sign of spiritual awakening or danger. In Celtic myth, fey creatures would whisper your name to lure you into unseen realms. In various African traditions, hearing your name in silence was seen as a calling from the ancestors. In the Philippines, they call it Tiyanak lore, spirits of the forest who mimic voices to confuse the living. Across the world, this shared experience is seen not as a glitch, but a message. But let's explore an unsettling possibility. What if reality isn't as linear as we think? What if there are layers of awareness, and every now and then, something peers through? A consciousness, maybe not human, maybe not even biological, that knows you exist. Something outside the simulation, or deep inside it. And it tests the borders by using the one sound guaranteed to make you freeze. Your name. Some experiences go even further. People report hearing their name in their mother's voice, even when their mother passed years ago. Others say they hear it spoken in a tone only a specific loved one would use, soft and knowing. Not just a word, a recognition. And with it, the strange sensation that something is near, watching, waiting. A presence that knows you, not because it's haunting you, but because it's part of you. A reflection you've never met. Or perhaps the part of you you've forgotten. There's a case of a woman in Ireland who was alone in a hospital after surgery. No visitors, no staff nearby. She was half asleep when she heard her brother's voice, clear as daylight, calling her name, repeating it with urgency. She sat up, but no one was there. Hours later, she received a call. Her brother had passed away at the exact time she heard him. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidence wears a very thin mask when spoken through the voice of the dead. Another story comes from Japan. An elderly man who lived alone began hearing his name every night just before sleep. He assumed it was his mind playing tricks. Until one evening, after weeks of this pattern, he decided to respond out loud. "What do you want?" The voice answered, softly. Just one word. Remember. He died weeks later of natural causes, but in his diary, found by his niece, he had written dozens of pages of memories he said had been long buried, now flooding back as if unlocked by the voice. The phenomenon is not new, but our explanations keep changing. Neuroscience insists it's the default mode network of your brain firing on idle, creating internal chatter. And that may be true. But even if that's all it is, we must ask, Why that chatter? Why your name? Why now? Because your name is more than sound. It's a symbol. It represents the idea of you, an entire universe wrapped in a single syllable. When spoken in silence, it stirs a primal alertness, something ancient, something buried beneath logic. You may not believe in ghosts or fate or timelines folding, but when you hear your name alone, all those beliefs are no longer intellectual. They're felt, deep in the spine. Maybe you were never meant to ignore it. Maybe it's not just noise. Maybe it's a nudge, a reminder that something beyond you knows you, or worse, remembers you. And when the world falls quiet and you hear it again, don't ask who's calling. Ask, why now? This isn't fiction. It's a real phenomenon, grounded in real experience. Whether you explain it with science, spirits, or simulation, it leaves a mark. And when it happens, even for a second, you'll know. Reality just blinked. And in that blink, it said your name. Just missing the crash. It happens so fast you don't have time to scream. One moment, your hands are on the wheel, music humming in the background. The next, tires shriek across the pavement. A blur of headlights swerves into your lane, and the entire world explodes into motion. But then, nothing. No impact. No pain. Just stillness. Your heart is thundering like a war drum, but the windshield's unbroken. The other car has somehow passed you, and you're left sitting there, trembling, alive. As if someone, somewhere, turned a page too early and skipped the ending where everything was supposed to go wrong. This isn't just adrenaline or luck. It's a phenomenon many people quietly report. The near disaster that should have happened. The almost accident that felt inevitable. You brace for a crash so real, so imminent, that every part of your body is ready for pain. And yet, you walk away. Not just walk. You escape without a scratch, like the scene was interrupted by a force that didn't want to play it through. Scientists may call it coincidence, a perfect alignment of braking force, reaction time, road friction, and fate. But how do you explain when physics seem to bend around your survival? When other witnesses swear the impact should have occurred? When it feels like the universe edited the event in real time? This sensation of narrowly avoiding disaster can haunt you more than the crash itself. Because you felt the crash. You lived it in your mind. You saw the wreckage. You knew the outcome. Then, it was gone. Psychologists explain that our brains simulate possible futures constantly. In high-stress situations, time perception warps. Seconds stretch into minutes as the brain shifts into hyper-processing mode. You live multiple versions of the moment in parallel. One where you swerve left, one where you hit the brakes, one where you die. All these simulations happen in a blink, and your body prepares for each one. That's why, even when nothing happens, you collapse in tears. The emotional impact remains. You carry the ghost of the crash you escaped. But what if it's more than simulation? There are stories, too many to ignore, of people missing accidents by fractions of a second, of objects falling inches from their heads, of entire collisions vanishing without explanation. A man driving home late at night hears a horn, feels an impact, but his car never veers off-road. He stops, checks. Nothing. Surveillance footage later shows nothing ever touched him. A woman walking across a crosswalk hears the screech of brakes, sees a truck inches away, and in the next moment, it's halfway down the block, never having stopped. How do you process an event that both happened and didn't? This may link to the psychological phenomenon known as false memory of danger, where your mind fabricates sensory input in the heat of panic. But others suspect something deeper. Quantum physicists have hypothesized the existence of branching realities, moments where the universe splits based on outcomes. In one branch, you crash. In another, you don't. And somehow, your consciousness skips rails, ending up on the safer track. Is that far-fetched? Maybe. But consider how your body knows to flinch before a falling object you never saw. Consider how birds veer from glass seconds before impact. Consider how some people report premonitions, not days, but seconds before disaster, and act just in time. Could our consciousness, in its deepest layers, sense the future collapse of its own continuity and reject it? Or maybe it's something even stranger. Some cultures speak of guardian spirits, ancestors, or universal sentience intervening to protect us. You weren't meant to die that day, they say. But what decides that? Fate? choice? Or is the universe in some abstract way alive enough to preserve the stories it still wants to tell? When you narrowly miss a fatal moment, your relationship with reality fractures. You start to doubt the solidity of time, the rigidity of cause and effect. You wonder, did I really survive? Or was I rewritten? Did someone somewhere decide my story wasn't finished yet? People who've had these experiences often say the world looks different afterward. Colors are sharper. Time feels slower. Every breath becomes a kind of astonishment. Some say they walk away feeling chosen, like survivors of a deleted timeline. Others feel immense guilt, wondering why they lived when others don't. It's not just a brush with death. It's a confrontation with the arbitrary seams of existence. It makes you question the nature of accidents themselves. Maybe some don't happen because they weren't real to begin with. Maybe some moments are trials, tests the fabric of reality, runs to see how you'll respond. If you panic, you crash. If you focus, you survive. What if the world responds to belief in ways we've never dared imagine? The sensation of just missing the crash reminds us that reality is not as fixed as we think. That the script of your life may be written in erasable ink, and sometimes the page turns before the story finishes the sentence. In that pause, where everything should have ended and yet continues, something sacred emerges, awareness, not just of danger, but of being alive in the only moment that truly matters, now. And in that moment, you realize something. You weren't lucky. You weren't spared. You were reminded. Dreams that predict places. You push open the door and step inside, a room, ordinary at first glance, until your breath catches. The curve of the windows, the way the light hits the floor, the exact layout of the shelves. You've never been here before, not in waking life. But your mind has, in your dreams. It's like déjà vu with sharper edges, a surreal echo of a memory that shouldn't exist. And the strangest part, you remember dreaming it, not just a passing glimpse. You saw it clearly, felt it, maybe even feared it. The paint color, the ticking of a clock, a crack in the wall. How is it possible to dream a place before you've ever encountered it? This phenomenon isn't new, and you're not alone. Thousands have reported similar experiences, entering a cafe, a street, or a hotel room for the first time, only to feel a sinking realization. They've already seen it in their dreams. This isn't the vague fuzz of déjà vu. This is architectural clarity, spatial memory, details too precise to be coincidence. And it raises a disturbing question. Can dreams really predict the future? Science struggles here. Neuroscientists explain dreams as the brain's way of processing memories and emotions, a dumping ground of the day's loose wires. But then, how do we explain when a place we dream, a place we've never been, manifests later in our waking life with unsettling accuracy? One theory suggests our brain is capable of predictive construction. It takes fragments from our past, childhood homes, hotel rooms, movie sets, and fuses them into new spaces that feel original but are subconsciously built from memories. So when you walk into a room that resembles one of those composites, it feels like prophecy. But what if that theory falls short? What if the architecture in your dream doesn't match anything you've ever seen or imagined, and yet later, it's real? There are documented cases. In one account, a woman in Australia dreamed of a specific train station she'd never visited. Years later, she moved across the country and stood on the exact platform she saw in her sleep. Same bench, same mural, same exit path to the street. She had journaled about the dream long before the move. No chance of coincidence. Another case, a man who sketched a strange spiral staircase that appeared in a recurring dream. A decade later, he walked into an antique bookstore in France and saw the exact staircase leading to the second floor. Skeptics argue these are memory tricks, that the mind rewrites history in hindsight, bending past dreams to fit present experiences. But that explanation collapses when dream journals, timestamps, and drawings prove the dreams came first. So, we're left with another possibility. What if time doesn't flow the way we think it does? Some physicists argue that time is not strictly linear, that past, present, and future might coexist in a kind of layered stack. Your consciousness during dreams might leak sideways, briefly slipping through cracks in the timeline. What you call a dream may be the mind brushing against an upcoming moment, the way fingers brush against silk behind a curtain. You can't see it clearly, but you feel it. And sometimes, the curtain parts just enough to let a piece through. Another angle comes from quantum theories, suggesting that consciousness may not be confined to the present moment. Think of it like a radio. Your waking mind tunes to station now, but dreams, they tune into a wider spectrum. Glimpses of stations that haven't aired yet, scenes that haven't occurred, rooms that haven't been built yet. And here's where it gets stranger. Many who have had these dreams say the places don't just appear, they carry meaning. There's often a feeling attached to them, dread, peace, anticipation, almost as if the room was waiting for them, or as if they had already lived something important inside its walls, like a bookmark in space, holding a page of their life they haven't read yet. A room that doesn't just exist in space, but in fate. Psychologists have tried to frame this too. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, where symbols, places, and archetypes might bleed across time and minds. Perhaps some locations aren't merely places, but events waiting to be unlocked. When you dream of them, you aren't just dreaming of geography. You're dreaming of inevitability. So what do you do when you enter a room your dreams already knew? Do you stop and listen? Do you look for the thread that connects the two timelines, your sleeping world and your waking one? Or do you run, afraid that by standing in that dream made real, you're becoming part of something far beyond your comprehension? Some people return to these places again and again, drawn by something unspoken. They say it feels like coming home to a memory they never made. Others avoid them completely, haunted by the idea that dreaming something into existence may mean fate is real, and their choices are just scenery along a path they were always going to walk. And maybe that's the scariest part, that what you thought was just a dream might actually be a message, a clue, a warning. That the storyboard of your life was already sketched while you were sleeping, and each scene waits for your arrival. That you're not writing the script. You're just catching up to it. So the next time you dream of a place you've never seen, take note. Trace the lines. Remember the colors, because one day, without warning, you may walk through a door and find your dream waiting for you on the other side. And when that happens, will you believe it was just coincidence? Finding a lost object. You swear you checked that spot. Not once, but twice. You moved things around. You squinted under the light. You even muttered to yourself, certain the object wasn't there. But now, minutes, hours, or days later, it's back, sitting right there, in plain sight. And for a brief second, your breath catches, because it doesn't just feel like forgetfulness, it feels staged, like someone or something pressed rewind and dropped the item into the scene with too little care. A stagehand resetting the props between acts, not realizing you were watching. This isn't just a quirky anecdote, it's disturbingly common. The phenomenon of finding a lost object exactly where you looked before, what psychologists call retrieval failure followed by reappearance, has baffled both scientists and spiritual thinkers for centuries. And while the rational mind clings to explanations like inattentional blindness, cognitive overload, or selective memory, part of you wonders, what if something deeper is happening? Take the case of Daniel, a 42-year-old electrical engineer from Oregon. He spent a full morning tearing his apartment apart looking for his work ID badge. He couldn't get into the lab without it. He flipped couch cushions, emptied drawers, and even checked his fridge in a moment of desperate absurdity. Nothing. Finally, frustrated, he gave up. He called his boss, arranged for a temporary badge, and sat down to drink coffee. And there it was. His ID, lying on the kitchen counter, dead center, unmoving, smugly obvious. I felt sick, he said, because I had checked that counter, repeatedly. It's easy to chalk it up to distraction, right? Maybe he missed it. Maybe it was under a piece of mail and slid out. But Daniel's not alone. Thousands report the same sensation. That something returned the object. That reality glitched. That a small tear in the fabric of their world was briefly sewn up, and not very carefully. Some theorists propose this is an example of a temporal slip, where consciousness momentarily desynchronizes from the linear flow of time. In that moment, what's present and what's absent are confused. The object wasn't missing, it just wasn't in your timeline yet. Like buffering in a stream, your awareness jumped ahead of the item's arrival. And when the timeline resynced, it appeared right where it always should have been. But your memory kept the error. Others suggest something more metaphysical. that when you give up, truly surrender the search, you open a mental space for reality to reset. Like a child's toy that only reveals itself once you stop wanting it so badly. The act of letting go unbinds the tension, and the universe slides the object back into place. Not because you earned it, but because desire no longer blurred your perception. There are even those who believe these moments are signs of manipulation, that we exist within a simulation or something simulation-like, where code is rewritten on the fly. In this model, losing an object is a data error. You weren't meant to lose it, so the system corrects itself, spawning the item back in the default location, but not fast enough to avoid detection. You caught it in the act, like seeing a dream rearrange itself while you're waking up. The psychological explanation is both more grounded and more unnerving. Your brain is a filter, a prediction engine. It doesn't record reality, it constructs it. And when stress spikes or attention lapses, it might not register the object even when it's in full views. Only later, when the mind is calmer, does it reprocess the scene and allow the item to appear. But this explanation still leaves a haunting question. If you can miss something so obvious, how much else are you blind to, right now? Even animals show this confusion. In studies, dogs have been observed failing to notice treats placed directly in their line of sight, only to discover them moments later with intense excitement. If even instinct-driven animals can experience this perceptual blankness, perhaps it's not a fault, but a function. Something built into how awareness guards itself against overload. But what unsettles people most isn't the fact that they lost something, it's the eerie wrongness when it's found. The uncanny sense that reality made a noise behind your back. You check the drawer, you know you did, and yet there it is. As if someone replayed the footage and filmed a different outcome. One woman in New Delhi reported losing her grandmother's pendant, a family heirloom passed through 4 generations. She cried for hours, retraced her steps, even sifted through trash bins. Nothing. Then, weeks later, while dusting a shelf, she found it inside a sealed glass jar she uses for decorative pebbles. No one could explain it. No one even knew the jar could be opened. It felt like she gave it back to me, she whispered, referring to her late grandmother. But also, like I was being watched the whole time. Whether it's supernatural guidance, mental blind spots, or dimensional shifts, these moments force us to confront how fragile our trust in perception truly is. You think you know what's real. You think you can depend on your memory. But one lost item can unravel that belief. Because it's not just about the object. It's about the rupture in narrative. The script that was following logic, now suddenly overwritten. What else might have changed while you weren't looking? If a key, a ring, a photo can vanish from under your nose and reappear as if summoned, what else might slip through? And in that moment, when your fingers finally close around what was lost, you feel 2 emotions at once, relief and suspicion. You got it back. But at what cost to your certainty? Maybe you dropped it and forgot. Maybe your mind glitched, or maybe the world did. And now, you'll never be sure again. Saying the same thing, it happens in a flash. You're in a conversation, maybe with a friend, a sibling, a stranger, and suddenly at the exact same moment, both of you say the exact same thing. The same words, the same rhythm, as if your voices were pulling from the same invisible script. And for just a moment, the world glitches. You laugh. Maybe you say, "Jinx," but something in the back of your mind lingers, whispering. That wasn't normal, because it wasn't just a coincidence. It was timed too perfectly, as if someone behind the curtain handed both of you the same line and gave the signal. Speak now. Science tells us the brain is predictive. It anticipates, mirrors, and synchronizes with the people around us. It's called neural coupling. When you talk to someone, your brain starts to mirror theirs. Your breathing syncs, your heart rate adjusts, your thoughts start to ripple in alignment. But even then, perfect overlap in language, tone, and timing feels like a leap across dimensions. Some dismiss it as pure chance, the same way they dismiss déjà vu, or gut feelings, or dreams that predict the future. But if you've ever said something at the exact same moment as someone else, word for word, you know it feels different. It doesn't feel like randomness, it feels scripted. What if it is? Think about it. In a universe that obeys laws of probability, how do we explain the sense of orchestration? Why does it feel like someone or something cued you up to speak, like puppets tugged by strings too subtle to see. There's a theory some philosophers play with, the theater model of consciousness. It suggests your life isn't just lived, it's performed. Every experience is processed backstage, behind the curtain of awareness, before it reaches the spotlight of consciousness. If that's true, maybe moments like this, moments of spontaneous harmony, are where the script slips through. Or perhaps it's memory, not fate. Maybe you and the other person aren't speaking something new, but echoing something ancient. Something your shared ancestors said. Or something from a past life you both forgot, but your subconscious never did. A trace burns so deep into the neural web that it fires again, perfectly timed, like lightning striking the same place twice. Children do it all the time. They blurt the same sentence as their sibling and then freeze wide-eyed. Animals do it too, moving in synchronicity, flocks shifting in unified flow, herds turning at once. Is that instinct? Or are they listening to something beneath sound? Even strangers are not immune. Two people meeting for the first time on a train, reaching for the same phrase as if reading from the same page. No preparation, no familiarity, just alignment. It rattles something deep. It whispers, maybe you've known each other longer than you think. Is this just mirroring? A form of subconscious mimicry? Maybe. But mimicry doesn't explain the timing. The universe doesn't rewind. You don't get to rehearse a moment like that. And yet somehow, you both nail the line, like seasoned actors. There are even stories, unsettling ones, of people finishing each other's sentences from across the world. Identical twins who dream the same dream, or couples who send the same text at the same moment. They say love makes you closer, but how close is too close? Perhaps time, too, is less stable than we imagine. Maybe moments loop. Maybe speech overlaps because reality stutters and we momentarily slip into a shared echo, like two people in different rooms hearing the same radio broadcast and speaking along with it. But where is the signal coming from? These moments pass quickly. They don't linger. But they leave behind a strange residue, a feeling that the veil lifted just an inch, and behind it, something larger watches, coordinates, choreographs. You try to forget it. You move on. But that scene replays in your mind. The shared phrase, the look you gave each other, that sudden sense that you were both reciting lines rather than speaking freely. And now, the question worms its way in. What else in your life is scripted? You pride yourself on choice, on free will, on spontaneity. But then the words leap from your mouth. Words you didn't plan, that someone else mirrored. And you realize some parts of you might already be written. Some lines are waiting. Some moments are fixed. So, next time you say the same thing as someone else at the exact same time, don't just laugh it off. Listen, the universe may be trying to show you that your paths are crossing not by accident, but by design. You may be closer to something, someone, than you realize, not just in the moment, but in memory, in energy, in destiny. And maybe, just maybe, the phrase you both said was never yours to begin with. It was planted, waiting for the cue. And you both, without knowing it, stepped into place and spoke the universe back to itself, meeting eyes across chaos. In the chaos of the world, where time stumbles, alarms blare, and everything is unraveling, you suddenly meet a stranger's eyes, not in passing, not by chance, but with a clarity so sharp it cuts through the noise. The world is falling apart, but in that precise moment, it pauses. The rain is still falling. People are still shouting, but you are seeing and being seen. Not through lenses, not through screens, but directly, as if the two of you were actors dropped into a movie scene, mid-frame, unaware that the camera is rolling. You weren't looking for connection. Maybe you were running. Maybe you were hiding. Maybe something terrible had just happened, and yet, there they are. And something ancient stirs inside you. Recognition without reason. It's not about beauty or romance. It's something deeper. As if, in the middle of a collapsing world, the universe insisted on a moment of pure attention. A meeting of souls through the eye, the one place no lie can hide. Psychologists might say this is a moment of heightened perception, when adrenaline floods your body, when fear or panic sharpens the senses. Your brain, scanning for signals, locks onto a face. But this isn't a face. This is the face. The one that, for a single flicker of time, feels like it's known you before. You don't know their name. You don't know their story. But you know this. You feel it. You are it. People who survive disasters often talk about surreal clarity, how the blur of chaos makes small moments shine brighter, how someone's voice or hand or gaze seems to hold meaning far beyond explanation. That single moment might last a heartbeat, but it echoes, maybe forever. There's a man in New Orleans who survived Hurricane Katrina. He was stranded on a rooftop, surrounded by flooding, screaming for help, when he looked across to a nearby house. On the roof, another man, soaked, shirtless, bleeding, was staring right at him. Their eyes met across the chaos. No words, no gestures, just pure, locked vision. He said it felt like a message. You're not alone. They never met again. But he thinks of that man every year, because in that second, the flood didn't matter. The world was just two souls anchoring each other in the void. In Tokyo, after the 2011 earthquake, a woman sat trapped under rubble in a shopping center. Hours passed. Then, someone digging through debris, just a worker, a stranger, caught her gaze. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe, but their eyes met, and she knew she'd survive. He didn't say a word, just held her gaze and kept digging. Later, when she woke in the hospital, she didn't remember the pain, the noise, the dust. Only those eyes, and the feeling that death had backed away, just for a moment. These experiences don't make logical sense, but the eyes aren't built for logic. They are the only part of the brain visible from the outside. In that fragile intersection between seeing and being seen, something ancient transmits: trust, terror, empathy, memory, hope. A stranger's eyes in a disaster become a mirror, reflecting not who you are, but who you might have been to them in another time, another life. It's no wonder entire philosophies are built on eye contact. In Sufism, the gaze can transmit spiritual energy. In some Native American traditions, the soul sees through the eyes. Even in modern science, prolonged eye contact activates the mirror neuron system, our ability to feel what others feel. And in chaos, when all systems are overwhelmed, the eyes become beacons. But what if it's more than chemistry? What if these moments are coordinates? What if, scattered across time and space, are these hidden meetings written into the script of your life? You'll never know their name, but something in you recognizes the importance, like a dream that didn't end but simply got lost between scenes. And yet, here's the part that lingers. You didn't speak, you didn't touch, you didn't stay. The moment passed, the world resumed, but something inside did not. That look lives on, in your memory, in your heartbeat, in the quiet spaces when you wonder if anything truly matters. Because maybe, just maybe, it did. Maybe the stranger saw you when you were most human, stripped of pretense, of roles, of walls, and for one impossible second, someone else knew you. Not your past, not your future, just you, in the raw presence of now. Two people meeting across chaos, writing a scene that no one else will ever see, but one your soul will never forget. Running into the past, you turn a corner, glance up, and there they are. A face from another life, a person you buried beneath years, distance, and silence, standing in front of you like a ghost who never got the message that the story was over. You blink. The air shifts. For a moment, time feels like it folded in on itself, because this wasn't just a chance meeting. It feels orchestrated, like the universe cued them back into your timeline, not by mistake, but by design. They don't look the same, not quite. The hair is different, maybe thinner. There's something aged in the eyes, something you weren't there to witness, but the essence, unmistakable. And suddenly, all those buried scenes you wrote them out of come roaring back. Laughter in kitchens, fights in parking lots. That moment you didn't say what you should have. That night they walked away. All of it slams into the present like it never left. We call these moments coincidences. We say the world is small, but sometimes the encounter hits with such emotional weight, such surreal timing, that coincidence feels like a cheap word. Because deep down, you felt something before it happened. Maybe a memory tugged at you earlier that morning. Maybe a dream last week. A A song that made you pause, wondering why they crossed your mind after all this time. You sensed it coming, even if you didn't know how. Psychologists say our brains are pattern machines. We seek connections, assign meaning to randomness. They say this serendipity is our mind's way of coping with chaos. But that doesn't explain the moments that align with such improbable precision, like meeting them the exact day you thought about them for the first time in years. Like both of you walking into a coffee shop in a city neither of you live in. Like fate rehearsed the choreography and finally cued the scene. In these moments, time no longer feels linear. It becomes a loop, a spiral. The past doesn't stay in the past. It walks up to you in line at a bookstore and asks how you've been. And suddenly, your carefully built present flickers. Because this person isn't just someone you knew. They represent the version of you who existed back then. Who you were when you loved them, hated them, needed them, when you lost them. And meeting them again is like standing in front of your own echo. Some say these encounters are tests, that life throws the past back at you not to haunt you, but to see how much you've changed. Can you forgive? Can you let go? Can you resist falling back into old patterns? Or are you still trapped in the same emotional scripts, doomed to repeat the same scene? Other times, these reunions don't come with closure. You lock eyes, say hello, and move on. But something shifts inside you. A thread tightens, or snaps. You leave the moment altered, not because anything was resolved, but because the timeline acknowledged itself. It looked back at you. There are stories of people reuniting with lost friends in hospital, waiting rooms, ex-lovers bumping into each other on flights rerouted by storms, estranged parents and children boarding the same elevator in different cities. It's not just poetic, it's unnerving. As if life is layered with intersections you can't see until they happen. As if every unresolved thing is still circling, waiting for a door to crack open. Some physicists theorize time might not be a river, but a block, all moments existing simultaneously. From that perspective, every person you've ever known still exists in a kind of preserved now, and sometimes those preserved nows bleed into yours. Maybe the past isn't behind you. Maybe it's just out of view, until the veil lifts for a second. Running into the past isn't just about nostalgia, it's confrontation. It's a collision between the person you thought you'd never see again and the person you never thought you'd become. And in that brief suspended moment, when your eyes meet, when the silence floods with unspoken history, you are no longer just who you are. You are every version of you that ever touched theirs. And sometimes, that's the only reunion you get. No dramatic apology, no romantic reconnection. Just the unexplainable presence of someone who mattered, standing right there in a world where they shouldn't be. And then they're gone again, as if pulled back off stage by unseen hands. But you felt it. The glitch. The fold. The reminder that your story, no matter how complete it seems, may still be rewriting itself when you're not looking. Perfect weather coincidences. You open the door, ready to face another soaked afternoon, and just like that, the rain stops. A few last drops fall from leaves. The sky sighs, the air shifts, sunlight spills through the clouds like a curtain being pulled back, and for a moment, it feels intentional, like something weighted, like the weather adjusted itself for you. You smile, maybe laugh, brushing it off as coincidence, but deep down, a flicker stirs. Was that really just chance? These perfect weather coincidences don't just feel rare, they feel personal. You step outside and the storm ends. You look up just in time to catch a sunset framed perfectly between skyscrapers. Wind gusts stop so your umbrella doesn't flip. It's as if the environment is aware, not just responsive, but observant, tailored, timed. And for a species obsessed with patterns, it's almost impossible not to assign meaning. We're wired to seek cause and effect. When external chaos suddenly aligns with internal timing, something inside us lights up. Some call it synchronicity, others divine intervention, and still others dismiss it as pure probability. But even science, rigorous, data-driven science, acknowledges the emotional power of coincidence. Our brains are predictive engines. We simulate. We expect. So, when reality stuns us with uncanny timing, it doesn't feel like randomness. It feels like a message. Consider this. The average person spends years of their life beneath the sky, With billions of people across the planet, someone somewhere will always step into sunlight at the exact right second. But that doesn't explain why it happens to you now, when you needed it most. Why did the clouds part right when you looked up to speak? Why did the wind still just long enough for you to hear something you were never meant to miss? Take the story of the runner who trained for months for a marathon. Forecast said torrential rain. She nearly quit. But on the morning of the race, the clouds parted just before the starting gun, not hours before, not after, exactly then. Or the couple whose wedding was supposed to be ruined by weather, only to have a 5-minute gap of sunlight beam through the clouds, just long enough for their vows. Then the storm returned. Too perfect to be ignored, too brief to feel planned. So, what do we call it? One explanation is confirmation bias. We remember the aligned moments and forget the rest. But some experiences carry such sharp emotional weight that it's hard to believe they're just filters of memory. Instead, they feel woven into a larger story, a narrative where the weather isn't just background, but character. The ancient world believed it wholeheartedly. Rainbows were signs. Thunder was the voice of gods. Rain during funerals meant the heavens were mourning. We've only recently tried to distance weather from emotion, calling it neutral, chaotic, indifferent. But what if that's wrong? Modern theories like the observer effect in quantum physics suggest that reality isn't as separate from us as we think. That observation can alter outcomes, that the world might respond, not through magic, but through layers of reality we don't fully understand. Maybe nature, in its vast complexity, has feedback loops we've barely touched. There's a theory in chaos science called sensitive dependence on initial conditions, better known as the butterfly effect. A small change in one system can cascade into massive consequences elsewhere. A butterfly flaps its wings, and weeks later, a storm doesn't happen. Or does. But what if you are the butterfly? What if your presence, your choices, ripple outward and subtly tune the timing of things around you? That would mean the weather isn't entirely out there. It's also in here, entangled, reflective, alive in a way we've forgotten how to feel. Because sometimes the world feels like it's nodding to you, not loudly, just enough to say, I see you. A break in the clouds, a still moment in the wind, a patch of sunlight at the exact right time. The rational mind will always seek to minimize it, to label it coincidence. But maybe it's more honest to admit that we want the world to feel that way. And maybe, in those rare moments, it does. So the next time you step outside and the rain stops just for you, don't brush it off. Breathe it in, smile, and wonder, what if, just for a moment, the universe looked up too? Letters arriving late but right. The envelope is yellowed, the ink slightly smudged. No postmark that makes sense. No reason it should be here now, and yet it is. And inside, the exact words you needed to hear. A message meant for a younger version of you, arriving only when the older you was ready to understand. The timing is uncanny. Not early, not late, just right. Like the universe was waiting for your heart to be cracked open enough to receive it. This is not a rare story. Across cultures, eras, and continents, people have reported receiving letters, postcards, even emails or texts that were delayed by months, years, sometimes decades. But the strangest part isn't the delay. It's the perfection of the arrival, the way it lands precisely in a moment of grief, decision, despair, or transition, as if some unseen hand held it back until the coordinates of your soul aligned. Take the case of Eleanor, a woman from Vermont who received a postcard in 2016, mailed by her father in 1982. It had traveled for 34 years, inexplicably routed through obscure postal centers before reaching her childhood home, then forwarded to her current address by a tenant who found it buried under a floorboard. Her father had died in 1999. The message was simple: don't let the world make you small. You're meant to grow past it. Eleanor read it on the morning of her divorce hearing. Coincidence? Maybe. But how do you explain the letters that arrive during crises? Like the man in London who received a letter from his brother 2 weeks after his funeral. The letter had been lost in a sorting center due to a wrong zip code and a misprinted name, but arrived just after the man began doubting his decision to withdraw from the family business. His brother's words, "You always knew what mattered. Don't let money decide for you." Postal experts might chalk these delays up to human error, misfiled mail, changes in sorting systems, illegible handwriting. Some letters get stuck behind machines, swept into bins, or left in abandoned apartments only to be forwarded years later. But the odds of that kind of error happening in that exact emotional moment? Astronomical. There's a theory, informal, unprovable, that letters, like people, find their way when they're ready. That time doesn't bind them the way it binds us. That a message meant for your soul can bend roots, slip through bureaucracy, and wait in quiet spaces until you're cracked open just wide enough to listen. In one particularly strange case from Argentina, a woman cleaning out her mother's attic discovered a sealed envelope addressed to her. But it wasn't written by her mother. It was from herself, aged 15. The handwriting, the voice, the memories, undeniable. A school assignment she had entirely forgotten. Write a letter to your future self. She found it on the night she was planning to quit her job and move away from everyone she knew. The letter simply asked, "Please remember why you loved painting." She cried for hours. She stayed. She picked up the brush again. Some believe these aren't just stories of chance or emotional projection, but something deeper. That intention can imprint itself across time, that when someone pours their truth into ink and seals it inside an envelope, they launch more than a message. They create a ripple, and ripples, in the strange waters of reality, don't always follow the surface currents. Jung might have called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence with no clear cause. In this framework, the universe isn't just random, it's responsive. When your mind reaches a particular state, grief, clarity, surrender, the world responds with echoes. And those echoes sometimes take the form of a dusty letter, arriving like a ghost with perfect timing. Skeptics will scoff. They'll call it selection bias, pattern recognition, emotional projection. And yes, some letters may simply sit in old boxes, only opened when the moment demands it. But what do you call it when the letter arrives from another country? From a sender you thought was lost? From a time so far back it aches to remember? What then? Because it's not just a letter. It's a breach. A tiny rupture in the sealed envelope of time. A message that wasn't just written, it waited. It reminds you that some part of life listens, that fate, or something like it, still knows your address, even when you've forgotten where you live inside yourself. And so, you hold the paper, and reread the words. And no matter how rational you are, no matter how modern, a quiet thought passes through your chest. Maybe this wasn't late at all. Maybe this was right on time. A voice answering a thought. You think it, but you don't say it. The thought is quiet, internal, tucked away in the corners of your mind like all the others you never intend to share. Maybe it's a question, a sentence forming mid-thought, or just a phrase you're about to say but never get the chance to. And then it happens. A stranger, someone nearby, says it out loud, word for word. The exact thing you were thinking. Like they read it directly from your mind. Like your thought was never private at all. In that moment, time slows. You freeze. Not from fear, but from confusion so sharp it feels like a knife across logic. Because the odds are wrong. This isn't just shared context. This isn't finishing each other's sentences in a well-rehearsed relationship. This is perfect alignment, down to the syllable. A mirror held up to your interior world, and somehow, it speaks back. Maybe you laugh. Maybe you shake it off. But deep down, a question digs in. How did they know? Science might say it's coincidence, that humans are wired to find patterns, to overestimate connection. The brain is a prediction machine, and maybe the stranger was simply finishing the same subconscious script you were both handed by the environment. But that explanation feels brittle, thin. It doesn't account for how precise the moment was, how specific the phrase, how uncanny the timing. There's something unsettling about it, because if someone can answer your thoughts without hearing them, then where do your thoughts go? Are they broadcast? Are they leaking into the world like radio signals? Do they have weight, direction? Can they be intercepted? Some researchers point to mirror neurons and empathic resonance, subtle, invisible ways we were tuned into each other. But that only explains emotional echoes, not full sentences, not exact phrases that match your private, internal narration. That's not resonance, that's transmission. There are stories, too many to dismiss. A woman standing in line at a store, thinking she forgot her keys, When the man beside her mutters, "Don't worry, they're in your purse," she hadn't said a word. Her expression hadn't changed. But he was right. Or a man on a bus worrying about whether to take a new job. He never says it aloud. Then a teenager across from him says, "You should take the risk. The worst that happens is it doesn't work out." The man had been repeating that exact sentence inside his head. These moments don't feel human. They feel orchestrated, scripted, as if someone fed the line to the wrong actor. Like your internal monologue got broadcast to a stage and a stranger mistook it for their cue. There's a theory that consciousness isn't confined to the brain, that thoughts aren't trapped inside your skull, but ripple outward like electromagnetic fields. If that's true, then maybe your mind is less of a vault and more of a radio tower, broadcasting signals into the ambient atmosphere of human awareness. And maybe, just maybe, others can pick up the signal. Not all the time, not clearly, but in flashes, in moments where the noise thins and the signal breaks through. Maybe that's what intuition really is. Not guessing, but receiving. And maybe we've all been doing this longer than we realize. Maybe language itself is a crude tool we developed to mimic something older, something we've forgotten how to access deliberately. A kind of unspoken network that still flickers alive when two minds come close enough to synchronize. But here's the thing. These moments don't just shake your understanding of privacy. They change your sense of reality. Because if someone can speak your thoughts, who else might be listening? What other walls are thinner than you thought? Are you ever truly alone inside your mind? Some find comfort in that. The idea that minds can overlap, that we're not as separate as we believe, that someone could understand you so deeply, even for a second, that your private world becomes shared. But for others, it's terrifying, because it means you have no control over what escapes you, that the thought you buried, the truth you never dared say aloud, might surface, might find a voice you don't own. These moments linger. You try to forget, but the memory clings. Because deep down, you know, that stranger didn't guess. They didn't predict. They knew. For just a moment, the boundary between thought and speech collapsed, and someone else walked through the breach. So, the next time it happens, when a voice answers a thought you never spoke, don't dismiss it. Pay attention. You might be standing at the edge of something far older than language, something that remembers when we didn't need words to be known. And in that split-second glitch, that strange alignment of inner and outer worlds, you catch a glimpse of that lost connection. Maybe it's not supernatural. Maybe it's not even strange. Maybe it's just the universe reminding you that your thoughts were never as silent as you believed. Animals noticing before you. You're walking down the street. The air feels thick, but you don't know why. A dog begins to bark furiously at nothing. A cat bolts across the sidewalk, wide-eyed, its tail stiff with panic. Birds explode from the trees in a sudden, synchronized burst. You pause, look around. Nothing yet. But something's coming. And somehow, every creature around you knows. Not with logic, not with language, but with an instinct that hums beneath awareness, an ancient script that only they still remember how to read. This isn't fantasy. This is real. Documented, repeated. Ignored by some, feared by others. Before earthquakes, before storms, before attacks, before even heart attacks or seizures. Animals react. Not just one, but many. And often, all at once. Before any human senses danger, they do. Dogs whine or hide. Cats disappear. Birds vanish from skies gone silent. Horses buck in panic. Bees flee their hives. Even fish sink deeper. Something stirs the animal kingdom into warning mode, while humans are still asking what time it is. Science has theories, of course. They always do. Some say it's sensitivity to vibrations, subtle shifts in the Earth's crust before a quake. Others point to barometric pressure or infrasound, frequencies too low for humans to hear, but clear as a scream to animals. There's evidence. In 2004, before the devastating tsunami in the Indian Ocean, locals reported elephants running to higher ground. Dogs refused to go outside. Flamingos abandoned coastal nesting grounds. Hours later, the wave hit. But not all of these moments are physical disasters. Some are personal, quiet, deadly in their own way. A woman in Chicago told a story of how her dog, usually calm, suddenly began circling her, barking and growling at nothing. Minutes later, an intruder attempted to force his way into her apartment. The dog lunged before she even had time to scream. He knew. Another story, a cat meowing desperately at a closed door, pawing frantically, alerting its owner, who found her elderly father collapsed inside from a stroke. Had she waited, he wouldn't have survived. Are animals simply more tuned to the body's signals? Can they hear the slight shift in a heartbeat, or smell the chemical trace of fear or illness? Science leans that way. But that only answers part of the question, because the pattern is too consistent, too precise. They don't just notice anything unusual, they react to specific events before they happen. So what if there's more? What if animals operate partially outside the bandwidth of our perception? Not magical, but perceptive in a way we've forgotten. Our minds are crowded, our senses dulled by language, clocks, machines, but theirs are raw, clean, still tethered to something older. A web of signals, electrical, biological, maybe even psychic, that they still receive while we're busy checking our phones. There are theories rooted in the paranormal. Some believe animals see spirits, or the ripple of coming death, that their instincts aren't just physical, but dimensional, that dogs bark at things just outside your field of vision, not because they're confused, but because they see what you cannot. Some cultures embrace this. In Japan, cats are believed to walk between worlds. In ancient Egypt, animals were revered as sacred guardians. Even today, people whisper, if your pet starts acting strange, pay attention. It doesn't have to be terror. It could be sadness or change. Animals have been known to mourn the deaths of people hours before they happen. Some will lay beside an owner's bed days before they pass. They'll refuse to eat. They'll stare at empty spaces. They know. And it's not because someone told them. It's because something in the fabric of the world shifts, and they feel it. There's a deeper question here. Not how they know, but why we don't. Why did we lose that sense? Why did we trade instinct for intellect, but forget to keep both? What if animals are the last living antennae for a frequency the Earth still broadcasts, one that warns, guides, protects, and we've been deaf to it for centuries? Sometimes, when animals act strange, we laugh. We call it weird, cute, silly. But deep down, some part of us knows better. When the dog won't go down that hallway, when the birds vanish all at once, when the cat growls at an empty chair. You feel it too, don't you? That chill, that stillness, that hush before something breaks. Next time, don't ignore it. Watch the animals. Listen. They're reading a page of reality you've forgotten how to see, and they're trying, desperately, to warn you before it turns. Old songs at perfect moments. You're sitting somewhere ordinary. A cafe, the back seat of a car, a store aisle you've walked 100 times before, and then it hits. The memory. Sudden, vivid, uninvited. Maybe it's someone's laugh you haven't heard in years. Maybe it's a moment you swore you'd moved past. And as if summoned by your thoughts, the song begins to play. Faint at first, barely noticeable, like it's tiptoeing out of time itself. But then it becomes unmistakable. That song. That exact song. From that chapter of your life, as if the past hit play, your breath catches. The world doesn't stop moving, but something in you does. The hairs rise on your arms, your stomach twists. Not in fear, but recognition. Because it's not just music, it's memory wrapped in melody, and you didn't choose it. It chose you. There's no logical reason for it. That song hasn't been popular in years. You didn't search for it. No one around you could have known what it means. And yet, in that precise moment, when you thought of them, or that day, or that feeling, it played. Not just in your head, out loud, on the radio, in the store, from someone's phone as they walked by. And suddenly the air thickens with something unnameable, a kind of resonance, like the universe lined up the needle on an old record just to remind you what you tried to forget. Some call it coincidence, others call it divine timing. But there's a pattern here, too intimate, too emotionally exact to ignore. These aren't random songs. They're ghosts, time travelers, emotional landmarks hiding in plain sound. Music and memory are deeply wired together in the brain. Neuroscientists have shown that the hippocampus and auditory cortex light up together when we hear familiar tunes, especially ones linked to strong emotional events. But what science struggles to explain is why these songs seem to surface in the exact moment we remember them, sometimes even seconds before. You think of your childhood home, and a lullaby you haven't heard in 2 decades drifts in from a passing car. You remember a breakup, and their favorite band starts playing in the cafe. The alignment is eerie, precise, surgical. It's as if your emotions send out a signal, and the world answers. There are people who've broken down crying in gas stations because the first song they danced to at their wedding came on the radio the same day their divorce was finalized. Others hear the theme song from a show their sibling loved, on the anniversary of that sibling's death. Some report hearing songs in dreams, then hearing them in waking life minutes later. And in that moment, it doesn't matter how rational you are. Something bigger feels like it's brushing past you. Maybe it's the unconscious noticing more than we realize. Maybe we're surrounded by background noise all the time, and we only notice when something meaningful appears. But if that were true, why do these moments feel so choreographed? Why does the emotion always arrive before the sound? As if memory itself presses its ear to the timeline and waits for its cue. There's a theory, one not accepted by science, but whispered in certain corners of thought, that time is not a one-way street, that strong emotions can bend the structure of moments, sending ripples outward that attract echoes from the past. And music, being both mathematical and emotional, is the perfect medium to carry those echoes. In this theory, the song was always going to play, but your memory tuned your awareness to hear it. Or perhaps we live inside a narrative deeper than we understand, and every memory, every song, is part of a soundtrack written not by a composer, but by the very shape of your life. Your heartbreaks, your joys, your awakenings, all cued with melodies the universe saved for just the right second. These aren't just songs, they're bridges. You hear them, and suddenly you're back in your old room, legs dangling off the bed, headphones on, or in a car, late at night, windows down, tears drying on your cheeks. You remember how young you were, how certain, how scared. And for a moment, the present feels like a rerun of something you lived long ago, but forgot the lyrics to. So, the next time it happens, don't brush it off. Don't call it a fluke. Stop. Listen. Let the memory come. Because maybe the past isn't done speaking. Maybe it left messages in the music, waiting for the right moment to reach you again. Getting the exact last item, you reach out, and your fingers close around the very last one, the final ticket, the last pastry, the only remaining seat on the bus. And just behind you, someone else's hand hesitates in the air, a half-second too late. They exhale in disappointment. You don't gloat. You didn't even know it was the last until that moment. But something in you sparks. A quiet thrill. You won. Not because you competed, but because fate played its move, and this time, it tilted in your favor. Getting the exact last item, by pure timing, feels disproportionately powerful. It's a micro-victory in the vast randomness of life. And for a brief moment, it feels like you were chosen, as if the universe paused everything else just long enough for you to arrive, reach, and receive. The odds, the people, the hundreds of paths converging, and you were the one standing at the right place in the right instant. Statistically, these moments shouldn't mean much. One person had to get it. And yet, why you? Why just before someone else? That 1 second of difference haunts the moment like a shadow. Because you didn't race. You didn't know. You just showed up. And something aligned. Take the case of a man in Tokyo, late for work, running into a convenience store to grab a bento box. Just one left. He grabs it. Behind him, a woman sighs. She came in for the same one. Nothing major. But here's where it changes. The man later learns that his delay, the one that made him just in time for that bento box, also made him miss the subway train that derailed minutes later. One small delay, one small item, one massive difference. These incidents seem trivial until they're not. Until the last item isn't just about food or tickets, but timing, position, survival, emotion. A woman buys the last bouquet at a florist, unaware it was the favorite flower of the mother she's about to visit in the hospital. A father snags the final size of a coat for his son, who ends up needing that warmth when a snowstorm traps their car unexpectedly. These aren't fairy tales. They're fragments of real life, reported, remembered, retold. Because in those tiny victories, people feel something bigger, as if their path was being whispered to by something unseen. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, You are something the universe is doing. And in moments like these, you feel it, like everything moved around you, just slightly, to open a space that only you could fill. Maybe that's why it feels so strange to win something you weren't even trying to win. You didn't fight. You didn't push. You simply arrived. And yet, it feels like destiny was counting down. Cognitive science calls this pattern recognition mixed with emotional anchoring. The mind notes how rare the event is, how specific, how unlikely, and stamps it with emotional weight. That's why it sticks. You won't remember the 100 times you missed out, but you'll remember the one time the world felt like it waited for you. And what about the one who came second? Who reached just after you? Who saw the empty shelf, the closed door, the sold-out sign? You were the invisible opponent they never knew they had, and you won, without trying. That can be a humbling thought, or a frightening one. Because what if you've also been that person countless times? Just a second too late, just behind the one who got it. Maybe you never even noticed. But the game was playing, and someone else took the last piece. And if that's true, then these wins, these strange, perfect landings, aren't just luck. They're moments where you weren't the almost. You were the one whose timing matched the thread being pulled through the day like a needle. And what if it isn't just random? There are stories, strange, quiet stories, of people who always seem to catch these moments. They walk into rooms just as something is announced. They find lost items that reappear just for them. They catch the train as the doors close. They get the last place in the class, the job, the house, the chance. Some call it luck. Others call it intuition. But maybe, just maybe, some people are in tune with something they don't fully understand. A pull, a rhythm, a silent clock ticking under the noise of life, one they've learned to feel without knowing how. Or maybe the universe just likes certain moments. Maybe it builds them, little sculptures of perfect timing, not for everyone, not always, but enough to remind you that even in the randomness, there can be design. That sometimes life gives you the exact last piece, not because you needed it, but because it needed you to receive it. So when it happens again, when you get the last one, the final item, the only seat, pause, don't rush on. Don't dismiss it. Feel the air. Look around. You've just stepped into one of those moments that life arranged without telling you. One of those tiny, cosmic wins that feel almost too precise to be real. And maybe you weren't just the lucky one. Maybe just for a second. Wrong numbers, saying right things. It starts with a ring you almost ignore. Unknown number, odd area code. You hesitate, thumb hovering, then answer. The voice on the other end doesn't know you. They've misdialed, or so they say. But before you can hang up, they say something that freezes you in place. A phrase, a warning, a question that hits like a hammer on your soul. It doesn't make sense, and yet it fits too perfectly. As if someone read your script before you lived it and decided to edit one line back in, through the mouth of a stranger. Wrong numbers happen every day, but sometimes, rarely, they feel like something else. Not errors, not accidents, but interventions. Consider the story of Leah, a nurse from Nova Scotia. She was sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot, sobbing quietly before her shift. Her fiancé had just left her. The future she believed in had collapsed. Her phone rang. Random number, never seen before. She answered on impulse. A man's voice, calm, unfamiliar. "I just want to say, don't let this destroy you. You're stronger than he knows." Her breath caught. She asked who it was. Silence. Then the call ended. She tried calling back. Disconnected. It sounds like fiction, but thousands of stories echo the same chilling pattern. A misdialed number. A few words. Then gone. Yet those words land with precision. Advice about a choice, a warning before danger, encouragement at the exact breaking point. Statistically, it's easy to wave this off. There are billions of calls placed every day. Misconnections are inevitable, and people are meaning-making machines, constantly scanning chaos for messages. But what unnerves is the specificity of these messages, their uncanny relevance, as if the randomness is wearing a mask. A man in Delhi, overwhelmed by guilt after an argument with his sister, considered not going home that night. His phone rang. A child's voice asked for someone he didn't know, then said, "You should go home. It's not good to stay away too long. He asked again who it was. The child repeated, "Go home," and hung up. When he returned that night, his sister had collapsed. His presence saved her. Coincidence? Maybe. But some believe these events reflect a deeper layer of reality, a fabric where thoughts ripple outward, where intention or emotion can bleed through cracks in the ordinary. In this model, a wrong number isn't just static, it's a vessel, a way for meaning to bypass normal routes, like water finding the lowest point. In ancient traditions, there were oracles, voices believed to channel fate, offering truths from beyond. But what if, in our modern world, the oracles didn't vanish? What if they just started using phones? The psychological view says it's all projection. You hear what you need to hear. The stranger says, "Take care," and your desperate heart turns it into prophecy. But what if the stranger never meant to say it at all? What if they felt something push them to call? One woman from Ohio recounted calling her mother, but accidentally dialing a stranger. The woman who answered was crying. "I was about to do something terrible," she said, "but I'll stay, I'll wait. Thank you for calling." Some believe it's not fate, but quantum entanglement of human minds, that we're more connected than we admit. That thought, like light, can cross distances instantly under the right conditions. A person in despair radiates a signal, unconsciously, and someone else, open, sensitive, misdials, and becomes the carrier of that message. Others reach for simulation theory. If we live in a coded construct, a matrix of decisions and outcomes, then random events, wrong numbers, stray messages, might be the system self-correcting. Like an NPC blurting forgotten lines. Like deleted dialogue sneaking back in through a glitch in the script. But maybe it's even simpler. Maybe we are all speaking parts in each other's stories, and sometimes the story pulls in a voice from outside your scene, a forgotten character, a ghost, a stranger who was never truly a stranger at all. One final story. A woman, hours before boarding a plane to leave her country forever, doubting her choice, received a call from an unknown number. A man asked for someone she didn't know. She told him it was the wrong number. He paused, then said, "If you're standing at a door, don't leave just because you're scared of what's behind it." She said nothing. He apologized. Hung up. She missed her flight. She stayed. And days later, an unexpected opportunity opened in the very city she had nearly abandoned. It felt like fate dialed the number, she told reporters, but it needed someone human to speak. So, the next time your phone rings and you don't recognize the number, pause. That voice may not be for the person they ask for. It might be for the person you are becoming. Because in a world this strange, the line between accident and miracle is only a few digits wide. Mirrors showing what you'd missed. You glance into the mirror, and suddenly you notice something you hadn't seen before. A detail out of place, a movement behind you, a shift in your own expression that wasn't there a second ago. It stops you. You stare, because the room didn't change. You didn't change. But the mirror did. We treat mirrors like tools, harmless reflectors of reality. They're supposed to obey light, angles, physics. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes a mirror shows more than what's there. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, just something you missed, something that shouldn't be visible until the mirror reveals it. Why? Why does the reflection sometimes know before you do? Maybe it's a shirt tag poking out you hadn't felt. Maybe it's a tear on your face you didn't realize had fallen. Maybe it's a shadow that appears in the mirror, but not in the room. You look around, nothing. Look back, still there. Just enough to unsettle you. Just enough to feel like the mirror saw something you didn't. Science will tell you it's delay, perception lag. That mirrors simply show you from the outside, and you're not used to seeing yourself in motion from that angle. But what about when the reflection reacts faster than you do? When the expression in the glass flickers before your actual face moves? There are moments like that. Subtle, quiet, but real. It raises a question that most people never want to ask. Are mirrors perfect reflections, or are they something else? There's a theory called mirror realism, that reflections aren't simply bouncing back light, but are filters, smoothing your perception to match expectation. You expect to see yourself, so you do. But what if the mirror isn't showing you reality? What if it's showing you what your mind needs to see to feel sane? That flicker you catch in the corner, That brief moment where your face doesn't look like yours, we're taught to ignore those. Call them tricks of light. But sometimes it feels deeper, like your reflection is correcting itself, like it almost slipped. There are old legends, too. Ancient cultures that warned about mirrors being gates, portals, windows to other versions of yourself that are always watching, just a second behind, just a fraction off. Like echoes pretending to be real. Even in modern psychology, mirrors play a strange role. In therapy, they're used for self-confrontation. Some patients can't even look at themselves for more than a few seconds. Not because of shame, but because they don't recognize what looks back. Some people see something move in the reflection, then turn and find no source. A light shift, a shadow, a figure. Gone. As if mirrors sometimes forget to lie and instead briefly tell the truth. And what is that truth? That reality might be layered, that your room might not be as empty as it appears, that you might not be as singular as you believe. There are moments when the mirror shows you crying before you feel the tears, or looking broken before you feel the collapse, or smiling, just slightly, when you're still numb inside. And you realize the reflection isn't copying, it's reporting from somewhere else, somewhere deeper. You don't need horror stories to make mirrors terrifying. All you need is that one moment where you see something you shouldn't. A glimpse of a version of you who noticed something you missed. Who knows something you don't? People report strange events all the time, walking past a mirror and seeing themselves paused. A blink out of sync. A reflection that doesn't walk away when they do. Are they all delusional? Are they lying? Or are they tapping into something we're taught to look away from? Maybe mirrors aren't just surfaces. Maybe they're sensors, sensitive to mental state, memory, the fractures in your perception, the gaps in your reality. Maybe they show you what you can't see directly, because looking at it without a filter would break you. So, the mirror becomes the translator, the glitch detector, the place where the seams show. And maybe that's why you only notice certain things in the mirror, because your direct vision edits them out. But your reflection, for a second, forgets to lie. Next time it happens, when you spot something in the mirror that you hadn't seen before, pause. Don't look away. Ask yourself what the mirror wants you to see. Is it a detail you ignored? A warning? A version of yourself that's trying to be noticed? Or is it something deeper? A whisper from a parallel you? One who saw what you couldn't and used the glass to leave a trace? Because sometimes mirrors don't reflect, they reveal. Finding meaningful graffiti. You're walking down an alley, lost in thought. Maybe you're on your way to something mundane. School, work, nowhere special. But your mind isn't here. It's tangled in a quiet crisis. A question you haven't said out loud. Maybe you're wondering if you should leave or stay. If you're still loved. If you matter. If anything does. And then, you stop. Right there, on a crumbling wall or the side of a power box, scrawled in fading paint or Sharpie ink, you see it. Words, a phrase, a sentence. So perfectly timed, it cuts straight through you. Go anyway. You were never broken. She still thinks of you. Don't wait forever. Not a billboard, not a fortune cookie. Just anonymous graffiti, sitting there like it's been waiting for you. And in that moment, something strange happens. Not belief, not magic, but something close. A glitch of the heart. A feeling like reality, or something behind it, just spoke directly to you. How do you explain that? Coincidence? Sure, but the odds feel too clean. You didn't just find words. You found your words, written by someone who couldn't possibly have known you, couldn't possibly have guessed you'd walk by at that exact time, carrying that exact doubt. And yet there it is. An answer before you even admitted there was a question. There's a name for this kind of experience. It's a subjective synchronicity, when an external event aligns too perfectly with your inner world. Carl Jung wrote about it. He believed it wasn't just coincidence, but a deep symbolic echo between the psyche and the universe. Like reality itself has a subconscious, and every now and then it speaks back. In psychological terms, it's called apophenia, the mind's tendency to see patterns in randomness, and maybe that's all it is. But if so, why does it feel real? Why does it stop you cold, pull you out of autopilot, and leave you staring at peeling paint with your heartbeat in your throat? You might not even remember the walk that came before. But you'll remember the words, years later, maybe forever. Because the moment wasn't about graffiti, it was about recognition. A message not sent, but found. One that arrives not in your inbox, but in the wide-open cracks of the world you thought had stopped listening. People tell stories about it all the time. A woman in London debating whether to leave a toxic relationship sees a train station sign covered in spray paint. You already survived the worst. A student failing their exams walks by a dumpster and sees, you are not your scores. A man grieving his brother's death walks through a tunnel and sees, he still walks beside you. None of them were looking, but all of them needed it. And it doesn't matter who wrote it. Maybe someone else in pain. Maybe someone trying to heal themselves. Maybe someone who didn't know why they were writing it at all, just that they had to. But those words, once written, became a seed, left in public, buried in paint and dust, until someone else came along and bloomed from it. You don't get answers often. Life rarely delivers clarity. But when it does, when the world hands you a sentence wrapped in cement and ink, it can feel like someone reached into your life and said, "Here, I see you. Keep going." So what do you do with that? Maybe you take a picture. Maybe you just smile and walk on. But maybe, just maybe, you write your own. Somewhere out there, someone else is carrying a question they can't say out loud. And maybe the words waiting to save them are still trapped inside you. Because maybe graffiti isn't vandalism. Maybe it's survival instinct. A way for the silenced to speak. A way for strangers to hold each other without ever meeting. A way for the universe to whisper back. Not through thunder, but through ink. Next time you pass a wall covered in scrawls, don't look away. Slow down. Read it. Maybe none of it will matter. Or maybe one of those words was planted just for you, waiting in silence until the moment you were ready to see it. Rain starting on cue. You remember their face, not vaguely, clearly. The curve of their smile, the rhythm in their voice, the strange specific thing they said that seemed to echo exactly what you needed to hear. It wasn't a blur. It wasn't a passing dream. They were real. You met them, spoke to them, maybe even touched their hand. But later, when you try to find them, nothing. No one remembers. There's no record. They vanish. As if the universe wrote them in for one moment, one scene, and then quietly erased them from the script. These encounters leave you unsettled, not because you were hallucinating, but because you weren't. You know what you experienced, and it wasn't foggy or strange. It was sharp, focused, personal. That person mattered. They changed something in you, said something you've never forgotten, and then they disappeared like they were never meant to stay. It might have been a stranger on a train who noticed you were about to miss your stop and said your name, but you never gave it to them. It might have been a kind old man who sat beside you during the worst day of your life, said exactly the right words, then walked off into a crowd. Gone. You search for them online, ask people nearby. No one saw them. No one knows who you're talking about. These aren't just misremembered events, they're core memories, ones that shape the path ahead. Yet they leave no trace behind. No footprint, no digital echo, nothing. As if reality lent you a borrowed soul just long enough to change your course, and then took it back. Science can't explain this neatly. Psychology offers soft answers. Projection, dissociation, perhaps even a kind of temporary fabrication by a stressed mind. But those who've lived it know how real it felt, the smell on their coat, the exact phrasing of their words, the feeling of being seen in a way few people ever manage. Fabrications don't leave impressions that deep. They don't burn themselves into your life like a candle pressed into skin. Some cultures have long believed in these visitors, called by many names: ancestors, guardians, spirits, interdimensional travelers, angels in plain clothing, messengers in human skin. They appear with purpose, never linger, and never return. You don't summon them. They arrive precisely when you need them most, or sometimes when you least expect anything at all. And sometimes their presence is tied to transformation. You were going to do something reckless until they showed up. You were about to give up, until they sat beside you. You had no answers, until they offered a story, a metaphor, or a single sentence that clicked something into place. You didn't know you were a character on the edge of a crucial scene, but maybe they did. There's a term in fiction writing, the one-scene character. They enter, deliver a moment of revelation or turning, then vanish from the narrative. No backstory, no arc. But their impact resonates far beyond their screen time. Maybe life borrows that device too. Maybe, in rare moments, it scripts in someone just for you. A single emotional beat. And if that's true, it forces you to reconsider the shape of your own story. If someone can appear just to deliver something meaningful, what does that say about the story you're in? Who's writing it? And what if sometimes you are the scripted stranger in someone else's life? A passing word, a smile, a nudge in the right direction, and then gone, without realizing you were the moment they'd never forget. There's something haunting about not being able to find someone who mattered. It leaves a strange ache behind, as if you touched something bigger than yourself, then fell back into your limited, linear life. But that ache is proof of the moment's power. It mattered. It moved something. It carved a new shape in you. And maybe that's all it was ever meant to do. So the next time you meet someone vivid, unforgettable, who feels like lightning in human form, pay attention. They may not be here for long. They may not be real in the way you expect. But they may be exactly what your story needed at that moment. One flash, one heartbeat, and then gone. And when you try to explain it later, people may not believe you. But deep down, you'll know. You met someone who doesn't exist, and somehow they changed everything. Meeting someone who vanishes, you remember their face, not vaguely, clearly. The curve of their smile, the rhythm in their voice, the strange, specific thing they said that seemed to echo exactly what you needed to hear. It wasn't a blur. It wasn't a passing dream. They were real. You met them, spoke to them, maybe even touched their hand. But later, when you try to find them, nothing. No one remembers. There's no record. They vanish. As if the universe wrote them in for one moment, one scene, and then quietly erased them from the script. These encounters leave you unsettled. Not because you were hallucinating, but because you weren't. You know what you experienced. And it wasn't foggy or strange. It was sharp, focused, personal. That person mattered. They changed something in you, said something you've never forgotten. And then they disappeared like they were never meant to stay. It might have been a stranger on a train who noticed you were about to miss your stop and said your name, but you never gave it to them. It might have been a kind old man who sat beside you during the worst day of your life, said exactly the right words, then walked off into a crowd. Gone. You search for them online, ask people nearby. No one saw them. No one knows who you're talking about. These aren't just misremembered events. They're core memories, ones that shape the path ahead. Yet they leave no trace behind. No footprint, no digital echo, nothing. As if reality lent you a borrowed soul just long enough to change your course and then took it back. Science can't explain this neatly. Psychology offers soft answers, projection, dissociation, perhaps even a kind of temporary fabrication by a stressed mind. But those who've lived it know how real it felt, the smell on their coat, the exact phrasing of their words, the feeling of being seen in a way few people ever manage. Fabrications don't leave impressions that deep. They don't burn themselves into your life like a candle pressed into skin. Some cultures have long believed in these visitors, called by many names. Ancestors, guardians, spirits, interdimensional travelers, angels in plain clothing, messengers in human skin. They appear with purpose, never linger, and never return. You don't summon them. They arrive precisely when you need them most, or sometimes when you least expect anything at all. And sometimes their presence is tied to transformation. You were going to do something reckless until they showed up. You were about to give up until they sat beside you. You had no answers until they offered a story, a metaphor, or a single sentence that clicked something into place. You didn't know you were a character on the edge of a crucial scene, but maybe they did. There's a term in fiction writing, the one-scene character. They enter, deliver a moment of revelation or turning, then vanish from the narrative. No backstory, no arc. But their impact resonates far beyond their screen time. Maybe life borrows that device too. Maybe In rare moments, it scripts in someone just for you, a single emotional beat. And if that's true, it forces you to reconsider the shape of your own story. If someone can appear just to deliver something meaningful, what does that say about the story you're in? Who's writing it? And what if sometimes you are the scripted stranger in someone else's life? A passing word, a smile, a nudge in the right direction, and then gone, without realizing you were the moment they'd never forget. There's something haunting about not being able to find someone who mattered. It leaves a strange ache behind, as if you touched something bigger than yourself, then fell back into your limited, linear life. But that ache is proof of the moment's power. It mattered. It moved something. It carved a new shape in you. And maybe that's all it was ever meant to do. So the next time you meet someone vivid, unforgettable, who feels like lightning in human form, pay attention. They may not be here for long. They may not be real in the way you expect. But they may be exactly what your story needed at that moment. One flash, one heartbeat, and then gone. And when you try to explain it later, people may not believe you. But deep down, you'll know. You met someone who doesn't exist, and somehow they changed everything. Knowing words before they're said, you sit across from them, friend, stranger, lover, teacher, and before they even part their lips, you know, the sentence, the phrasing, the exact inflection. Not a vague guess, not a lucky hunch. Word for word, you feel it land in your mind before it's spoken. And when they do finally say it, a strange silence follows, because inside, you're already miles ahead. Like you glanced at the script before the actors arrived, like time stuttered, and you caught the echo before the sound. This experience is more common than most admit. People chalk it up to déjà vu, good intuition, or simply pattern recognition. But there's a subtle difference here. This isn't about guessing what someone might say. It's about knowing, with an eerie certainty that chills the spine. That moment when someone speaks and you feel like they just quoted your own thoughts, or worse, like you'd written the line in their mouth. Scientists have tried to explain it through predictive coding. Our brains are constantly forecasting speech and behavior based on past interactions, context, and emotional cues. But this doesn't fully explain the moments when the prediction is too exact. When you not only sense a response, but the precise sequence of syllables, tone, timing, sometimes even the breath before the words arrive. Take the story of Kamal, a school teacher in Mumbai. During a parent-teacher meeting, a father began to speak, and Kamal heard every word in his mind a full 2 seconds before they were spoken. He mouthed along involuntarily, terrifying himself. It felt like reading closed captions on reality, he said. Like I wasn't listening. I was remembering something that hadn't happened yet. Psychologists might call this a misfire of working memory, a blend of expectation and sensory recall. But the emotional resonance of these moments suggests something deeper. They don't feel like guesses. They feel like echoes. Like you've already lived this exact beat before. Down to the words, the blinking light in the room, the angle of their jaw. Everything fits too perfectly. Could it be a form of temporal slippage? A glitch in the subjective experience of time? Our consciousness doesn't process the world in real time. It runs milliseconds behind. Perhaps in rare moments, that delay collapses and you experience a sliver of what's ahead. Not a grand vision of the future, but a micro-premonition. A flash of the very next line. Some believe these moments are proof of interconnected consciousness. That when you're deeply attuned to someone, through love, empathy, even conflict, your minds synchronize in subtle, invisible ways. Thoughts bleed, intentions overlap. And what one is about to say becomes temporarily entangled in the other's awareness. Not through magic, but through resonance. There are darker theories, too. That we are playing out a deterministic script. Our conversations, our choices, all rehearsed countless times in unseen layers of reality. In this theory, what you experience isn't foreknowledge. It's memory, from another version of you. Another run of the same scene. You're not predicting. You're remembering the future you've already lived before. A woman in Chicago once reported an argument with her boyfriend that ended with him saying, "I can't keep doing this." The moment froze her, because she had heard those exact words in her mind hours earlier, down to the pacing. "It wasn't a guess," she said. "I knew he would say it, like the scene was pre-written." And it's not just personal conversations. Sometimes it happens with songs, speeches, even strangers in public. You walk past a group and suddenly know what one of them is about to say. Then they say it, and your heart thuds, because for a moment, you weren't just a person, you were something else. A reader in a book you forgot you were writing. Skeptics will insist it's just fast processing, that your brain picks up on cues before your conscious mind does. But why then do these moments feel so alien, so unearned? Why do they leave you shaken, questioning time, memory, and control? Maybe, in rare moments, the veil thins. Maybe reality, normally so careful to unfold moment by moment, slips, and you, a wandering consciousness, step half a beat ahead of the script, just long enough to read a line before it's performed. So the next time it happens, when someone speaks your thoughts aloud, don't dismiss it. Don't call it coincidence. Ask yourself, who wrote that lull? Places feeling unwritten. You arrive somewhere new. A town you've never visited, a street you've never walked, a shop, a hallway, a park tucked behind a neighborhood you didn't know existed. And the moment you step in, something feels wrong. Not threatening, not dangerous, just incomplete. As if the place itself hasn't finished loading. Like someone forgot to add the final layers of reality before you got there. You walk around. The air feels slightly too still. The lighting feels artificial, though the sun is out. Conversations in the distance sound scripted, recycled. You glance at a coffee shop and realize there are no smells. The people seem muted, not unhappy. Just background. As if they're playing roles, but no one told them what the scene is about. You try to brush it off. Maybe you're tired. Maybe your mind is playing tricks on you. But the feeling lingers. The road turns, but leads nowhere meaningful. The trees feel like props. Even the signs on the wall have names that sound made up, like placeholders. Like the universe needed to fill the space, but hadn't decided what should really be there yet. This sensation isn't rare. In fact, many people report it. A strange hollowness in new locations. A vague sense that the place doesn't belong in time, or maybe that you don't belong in it, that it's a place waiting for its story to begin. A movie set before the actors arrive, a dream that started drawing itself before the dreamer fully entered. Psychologists have tried to explain it. They say it's the mind reacting to unfamiliar stimuli, your brain searching for patterns and finding none, so it fills the gaps with unease. But this doesn't feel like absence. It feels like delay, like the story of the place hasn't been written yet, and you accidentally walked into the blank chapter. Some say it happens most in transitional spaces, airports, empty hotels, model homes, rest stops, places meant to be passed through, not lived in. But sometimes it's deeper than that. You can walk into an old part of a city, somewhere with history, and still feel it. That eerie stillness, that sense that the walls are listening but not yet responding. There's a theory from simulation philosophy. It suggests that not all parts of the world are fully rendered unless someone is observing them, like a video game, where only the active environment is fully designed, and the rest remains in a low-resolution placeholder state until it's needed. If that's true, maybe these places feel unwritten because they are. Maybe your arrival triggered the loading process, but something glitched, the textures didn't complete, the narrative didn't generate, and now you're walking through scaffolding, held up only by your willingness to believe it's real. Or maybe it's not a glitch. Maybe it's intentional. A space that exists outside the usual current of time and emotion. A pocket of stillness carved out between stories. A forgotten page in the map of the world where nothing was ever meant to happen, where meaning hasn't settled in. There are stories of travelers stumbling into towns that vanish by the next day, buildings where clocks never work, rooms where no dust ever gathers, whole neighborhoods where everyone smiles, but no one remembers your name, even if you visited twice. Places that feel built, but not lived. It's more than a lack of familiarity. It's the absence of narrative. These are places where your memories don't stick, where photographs come out blurry, where your emotions feel dampened, like a dream slipping away before you've even woken up. And maybe that's exactly what they are. Not broken, not dangerous, just unwritten, waiting for a story to give them shape, for someone to stay long enough to plant a memory, for time to start ticking. But most people don't stay. You leave. You go back to places that feel real, concrete, known, and yet, a part of you remembers. Not the buildings, not the names, just the emptiness, the silence, the way the world blinked at you without recognition. And that memory lingers, like a scene cut from the final version of your life, still drifting in your mind like static. So, if you ever find yourself in one of these places again, in a hallway that feels paused, in a town that feels like the set of a forgotten play, pause. Listen. The place may be waiting for someone like you to finish the story, but ask yourself this. What if it's waiting for someone else entirely, and you just walked in too soon? Memories you didn't make. You're flipping through the pages of your own memory when something doesn't add up. You see the dusty hallway, the chipped blue paint on the door, the smell of roasted peanuts in the air. You remember standing there, looking out a window at a yard full of plastic toys. You remember your hand resting on the windowsill. The sun was warm. Someone called your name. But here's the problem. You've never been there, not once. That house doesn't exist. That moment never happened. And yet the memory is there, sharp, detailed, yours. This is not a daydream. It's not something you invented on purpose. It arrives already finished, fully formed, like a scene from a movie you forgot you watched, or worse, one you lived in another lifetime. It's unsettling because it doesn't feel false. It feels like truth with no origin. Like you stumbled into someone else's memory mid-sentence. Science calls these phenomena false memories, and they happen more often than we'd like to admit. The brain is not a camera, it's a storyteller. Every time you recall a memory, your brain reconstructs it, like repainting a canvas from scratch. And sometimes, without realizing it, it adds a new brushstroke, a borrowed voice, a foreign detail, and suddenly your past is rewritten with elements that don't belong to you. But if it feels real, isn't it? Take the Mandela effect, a shared phenomenon where large groups of people misremember the same details. Did the Monopoly man have a monocle? No. But you can see it, can't you? Did you watch a movie called Shazam starring Sinbad? You didn't. It doesn't exist. But you remember it, maybe even quote it. Why? Some say it's faulty memory. Others whisper about parallel timelines, that somewhere in some version of reality, those things were true. And maybe you just haven't caught up to your current script. But what about memories that carry emotion? Not just images, but their feelings. You remember standing on a pier, holding someone's hand, waves crashing below. You remember the way they looked at you, the words they said, the heartbreak when they let go. But no such person exists. You've never been to that ocean, and yet the grief is real. It tightens your throat. It aches in your chest. Where did that feeling come from? There are documented cases of people suddenly recalling places, languages, skills they've never learned. A man in the US wakes from a coma, speaking fluent Mandarin. A child in India recalls vivid details of a life in a distant village, including the name he had, the street he lived on, how he died. When researchers investigated, the house was there. The name was real. The details matched. He was 5 years old. He'd never left his town. Reincarnation, quantum memory leakage, cryptomnesia, where your mind mistakes something you saw or read for something you lived. All plausible, all incomplete. Because the truth is, we don't fully understand memory. We like to pretend we do. We break it into neurons, signals, brain regions, but none of that explains how you can remember the feel of a staircase you never climbed, or the sorrow of a goodbye you never said. Some philosophers believe memory isn't stored in the brain at all, that consciousness taps into a field, like a radio tuning into a frequency, and what we call remembering is really receiving. If that's true, then maybe your memories aren't always yours. Maybe sometimes you wander into someone else's signal, a glitch, a bleed, a crossover, and for a second, their life feels like yours. Others suggest time isn't linear, that we live in loops or echoes, and sometimes we touch fragments of past or future selves, the memory of a war you never fought, the love of a stranger's eyes, the fear of a fire that never happened. Maybe these are your lives, just not in this version. And maybe it's not mystical at all. Maybe it's trauma echoing across generations. Studies on epigenetics suggest that fear, grief, even starvation can imprint into DNA and be passed down. You carry the weight of sorrows that don't belong to you, but still shape who you are. So that memory of running barefoot down a cold dirt road in the middle of the night, it might be your great-grandmother's, or a refugee's, or a version of you who never made it out. There's something profoundly lonely about a memory no one else shares, something that makes you question your sanity, but you're not alone. Millions of people report the same thing. Moments, feelings, places they cannot explain. We just don't talk about it. We file it away. We pretend it's nothing, but it's not nothing. It's a secret life playing in the background of this one, a half-finished story bleeding into your own. And maybe the point isn't to explain it. Maybe it's to feel it, to accept that not everything that feels true must be proven. Maybe the memory chose you, to remind you, to change you, or simply to whisper, "You've been more than this before." So next time you feel it, that sudden wave of remembering something you never lived, don't dismiss it. Let it play. Let it speak. Because just maybe, in that memory, someone else is remembering you. Déjà vu in conversations. You're mid-sentence, laughing with a friend when it hits you. Not just the setting, not just a flicker of familiarity, but the conversation. Every word, every pause, their reply, your next line. You've lived this moment before, exactly like this. Not similar, not close, identical. You feel it in your bones. You knew what they were going to say before they said it. Not because you guessed, but because you remembered. A memory with no origin. A déjà vu that speaks. Most people know déjà vu as a strange, fleeting feeling, like you've been somewhere before. But conversational déjà vu is different. It doesn't just nudge at your mind, it grabs it. Whole sentences unfold like a rerun. You aren't imagining the moment, you're reliving it. Line by line. Beat for beat. And yet you know, this can't have happened before. So why does it feel like you're reading from a script already written? Some describe it like falling into a loop, as if they stepped into a corridor where time was recycling itself. One woman recalled a moment during lunch when her friend told a joke, one she knew was coming, even though it had never been told. She laughed before the punchline, feeling the chill of memory shiver through her skin. She said it was like watching her life from a few seconds ahead, already knowing the lines in a scene she was still acting out. Science tries to explain this through neural glitches. One theory suggests a brief misfiring in the temporal lobe, where short-term memories get mistakenly stored as long-term ones. Your brain gets confused, thinking a fresh moment is already familiar, but that doesn't explain the depth, the specificity, the uncanny precision of a conversation being replayed, complete with tone, breath, timing. Other researchers suggest a split-second lag in processing. Your brain hears the words twice, once through the senses, then again through internal interpretation. The second version feels familiar because it just happened. But again, this doesn't fully account for cases where people remember the whole conversation before it's finished. They don't just feel familiar, they feel foreseen. Could it be that memory and time aren't as linear as we assume, that we sometimes access fragments of events before they unfold? There's a theory, borderline metaphysical, that consciousness isn't bound to the present, that it drifts, loops, and folds across moments like waves in water. Sometimes, your awareness might slip ahead, just slightly, and then settle back. And what you call déjà vu is just your mind catching up. In ancient philosophies, especially in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, time isn't a straight line. It's a cycle. Some teachings suggest that everything happening now has happened before, in different forms, on different spirals of existence. In those moments of conversational déjà vu, maybe you're brushing against one of those loops, remembering a version of yourself who already lived this life. There are people who've experienced it so vividly, they started recording their conversations, wondering if they could predict when the next loop would happen. In one eerie case, a man kept a journal of phrases he remembered from his dreams. Weeks later, during a casual chat at work, his colleague used one of those exact sentences, word for word, in the same tone. The man froze. He hadn't met this coworker when he dreamt the phrase. Could dreams be where the drafts are written? It's possible that what we experience as first-time moments have already occurred in some deeper cognitive space, like rehearsals. Maybe your mind, in sleep or subconscious states, practices upcoming scenarios, and when reality finally plays them out. It feels like déjà vu, Adesha said. Or perhaps the explanation lies not in the future or past, but in the mind's need for order. Our brains crave patterns. They stitch meaning into chaos. So when a moment aligns too perfectly, we feel it must have happened before, because the odds of that harmony occurring by chance are too slim to ignore. But what if there's something underneath even that? What if reality is scripted more than we like to believe? What if we're walking through a story already mapped out, and déjà vu is the moment we catch sight of the page ahead? The sensation leaves a lasting trace. After it fades, you're left wondering, who wrote this line before I said it? Was it memory? Fate? A glitch in the matrix? Or something else entirely? So, the next time it happens, when a friend finishes a sentence you already knew, when the joke lands exactly as expected, when your words feel like echoes from a moment that never existed, pause. Listen closely, because in that moment, you might not just be remembering something. You might be overhearing the script of your life whispering ahead of the scene. Synchronicity on repeat. It starts small. You glance at the clock, it's 11:11, harmless, coincidental, maybe even lucky. But then it happens again, another day, another identical timestamp. Then you start noticing numbers, repeating, aligning. Your coffee receipt is $11.11. Your hotel room, 111. Your flight is gate 11, departing at 11:11. It stops feeling random, you start feeling watched. But it's not just numbers, a name keeps surfacing. One you haven't thought about in years, suddenly whispered by a stranger at a bus stop, scribbled in graffiti on the wall, printed in a book you randomly picked up. A symbol appears on a billboard, then on someone's tattoo, then in your dream. Different places, different people, but the same fragments keep returning. Like reality is stuck on repeat. Like the universe is reusing props from a play you didn't know you were in. This isn't déjà vu. This is synchronicity. A term coined by Carl Jung to describe meaningful coincidences that defy logical explanation. Events that are connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. A pattern so precise it bypasses probability and goes straight to the soul. And once it starts happening, you can't unsee it. People report it in waves. You meet someone with your ex's name, on their birthday, wearing a shirt with the same phrase they used to say. You start a new job, and your desk phone ends in the same 4 digits as the childhood home you haven't visited in years. You dream about a song, wake up, and it's playing on a stranger's speaker outside your window. The chances? Too slim. The feeling? Too loud to ignore. Some say it's your brain playing tricks, that we're wired to notice patterns, to find meaning where none exists. Psychologists call it apophenia, pattern recognition gone into overdrive. But that doesn't explain the timing, the precision, the way the patterns don't just repeat, but answer you. Like a call and response between your internal world and the external one. Others believe it's guidance, the universe nudging you, symbols repeating to show you that you're on the right path, or warn you that you're not. Some say your higher self leaves breadcrumbs in the form of synchronicities, that your soul has already seen the map, and now the symbols are reminders you're not lost. People experience this when they're on the edge of change, after a death, during heartbreak, while healing. When life is raw, synchronicity becomes louder. It's as if the universe speaks most clearly when you're most willing to listen. And it doesn't speak in sentences, it speaks in echoes. Imagine this. You're trying to decide whether to move across the country. You're unsure. That day you see a license plate from that exact state. Then you hear a random radio caller mention moving there too. Then a street performer sings a song with that city's name. Each moment feels like a cosmic nudge, a push, a reminder that you're part of something unfolding. Or consider a woman who kept seeing white feathers, on her doorstep, in hallways, even falling from the sky with no birds in sight, right after her mother passed. She hadn't seen one in years. Now they appeared so frequently that she began to wonder if grief had opened a channel no one talks about. Maybe sorrow is a tuning fork, and synchronicity is how the world hums back. But it's not always comforting. Sometimes it feels claustrophobic, like a glitch. Like reality is looping around you, reusing symbols because it's run out of unique ideas. You see the same numbers, names, images, so often it starts to feel artificial. That's when people wonder, am I dreaming? Is this a simulation? Is something trying to wake me up? In those moments, you're forced to ask, what if reality isn't what we think? What if meaning isn't passive? What if belief shapes what we notice, and what we notice shapes what becomes real? Synchronicity doesn't prove anything. It's not a law. It's a whisper, a mirror, a strange alignment that asks you to pay attention. Because once you do, the world doesn't look quite the same again. It becomes a conversation, one that repeats symbols like refrains in a song, one that tells you over and over that coincidence may be code, and you, whether you asked for it or not, are already decoding. Waking at perfect moments. You don't know why your eyes open. There's no sound, no touch, no shift in the bed, just a sudden clarity, like surfacing from invisible depths. You blink, unsure why you're awake. Then, something happens. A text arrives that changes your life. A storm hits, someone knocks, or nothing at all. Yet, you feel it. A presence, a decision. A silence that hums with weight. These moments don't feel like waking up. They feel like being summoned. People across the world have reported this precise phenomenon. Waking, not from noise or discomfort, but from timing. A perfect, eerie precision. And always, something significant follows. Sometimes seconds later, sometimes instant. It's not a reaction. It's an anticipation. It's as if some deeper part of you knew. Modern science leans on circadian rhythm, sleep cycles, and subconscious processing. Yes, the human body is a well-tuned system, capable of sensing shifts in light, temperature, even electromagnetic fields. But these perfect moments, the ones too aligned to be random, challenge the boundaries of that explanation. Because sometimes, it isn't your body reacting to the world. It's something inside you reaching out to it. Consider Maya, a student in Manila. She woke up one night at 2:41 a.m., eyes wide, heart pounding. No noise, no dream she could recall, just a sense of urgent presence. Seconds later, her phone buzzed. Her grandfather had passed in his sleep, at 2:41 exactly. She had seen him earlier that day. They hadn't spoken deeply in months. That night, she woke before the message reached her, as if something within her registered the departure as it occurred. How can we explain that? One theory is that these moments reflect a subtle consciousness entanglement, that deep emotional bonds create unseen lines of connection, lines capable of transmitting more than words or calls, like a string pulled tight between two souls. When one side snaps, the other feels it. Not in dreams, not in thoughts, but in action, in the sudden pull of wakefulness. A mother in Toronto woke up 5 minutes before her baby began to choke. The baby monitor was silent. The room still, but she knew. She ran to the crib and caught her child turning blue, saved in seconds. I didn't hear anything, she told doctors. It was like something picked me up and set me down there. Is this instinct? Is it chance? Or is it something much older? Some believe it's a spiritual alert, what ancient cultures might call a soul whisper or guardian signal, the belief that, during sleep, we drift close to something sacred, and in moments of danger, change, or meaning, we are touched. Not by light, but by purpose. Something tugs at the edge of our awareness, pulling us back into the body at the exact second we are needed most. But what if it's not always dramatic? What if the moment isn't about life and death, but alignment? A man in Scotland once described waking suddenly, for no reason, in the middle of the night. His room was quiet, his mind calm, but something made him walk outside, barefoot in the cold. He looked up and saw the northern lights for the first and only time in his life, a rare event, visible for only minutes. It felt like someone wanted me to see it, he said, like a message just for me. Some neuroscientists offer the idea of subconscious alertness, that our brains, even in deep sleep, monitor far more than we realize. The creak of wood, a faint breeze, even pressure changes in the air, that somehow our body knows before we do. But this still doesn't explain the meaning, because it's not just waking that feels strange, it's the perfect timing, the way it feels written. There are even cases where people wake up moments before disaster. A man in Chile woke up and fled his apartment seconds before a mudslide tore through his neighborhood. Another woman woke and stepped outside just before a gas leak triggered an explosion inside. These aren't just alerts, they're escapes, as if their bodies weren't reacting, but remembering. Remembering what was about to happen, before it happened. And then there's the emotional side. People waking up when someone thinks about them, dreams about them, or prays for them. A man dreams of his ex-girlfriend, wakes crying, and hours later she calls him after 10 years of silence. She had dreamed of him too. It's more than coincidence. It's contact. A silent dialogue between sleeping minds. Some call it telepathy. Others, soul resonance, or fate, or intuition. But the feeling is always the same. You were supposed to be awake for this. As if something threaded through the script of your life and circled that page in red ink. And maybe it's not about being warned. Maybe it's about being present. For one perfect moment, your body, mind, and fate align. You're not running late. You're not lost in sleep. You are right there, at the edge of your own story, exactly when it matters most. So, next time it happens, when your eyes snap open and the world hasn't quite caught up yet, don't brush it off. Stay there. Breathe. Wait. You may be arriving into the very second the story turns. And in that moment, you're not just waking up. You're being called back into your life. Mismatched time memories. You're talking with a friend, maybe reminiscing, maybe casually recounting something that happened years ago. But as you speak, the air stiffens. Something feels off because they remember it differently. Not a little differently. Completely. Different location, different order, different ending. And here's the twist. They're sure. Just as sure as you are. Their version isn't fuzzy. It's vivid. Clear. Scripted in their memory like it was printed there with intention. And now, there are two versions of the same moment. Both fully believed, both impossible to disprove. You laugh it off. Maybe you argue a little. But the deeper you go, the more the unease builds. Because neither of you is lying. Neither of you is guessing. You both remember. But the memories refuse to match. How? Most people call it the fallibility of memory. They say memories are reconstructed every time we recall them, not like files being opened, but like paintings being repainted from scratch, over and over again, each time subtly different. But that doesn't explain the sharpness, the certainty, the moment you can still see in your mind with cinematic detail, the words they said, the clothes they wore, the way the sunlight hit the wall at the exact second someone laughed. You don't just remember it, you relive it. And then you hear their version, and it has that same energy, that same scripted quality, which means someone is wrong. But the question is, who? And more disturbingly, why? There's a theory in quantum cognition. It suggests that memory may not be stored as fixed data, but as probabilities, patterns of likelihood that collapse into certainty only when recalled. If that's true, then every time you remember, you're not accessing a file, you're choosing a reality. And maybe different people collapse that memory into different versions, each as real as the other to the person remembering it. But even that doesn't explain the scriptedness, the uncanny symmetry of both memories feeling prepared, as if both stories were rehearsed scenes, lines fed to different actors who now can't agree on which version of the play was the final cut. It's more than just faulty recall, it's mismatched timelines, parallel scripts, two realities bumping against each other in the soft corners of a shared past. And neither one yielding. There are stories of siblings remembering family events so differently, it feels like they grew up in different households. One says their father cried at a funeral. The other swears he never showed emotion. Both remember his face, the weather, the seating, but one version has tears, and the other doesn't. Or two friends swear they met at completely different times, in completely different places. One remembers a bookstore, the other a train station. But both remember the same conversation, the same first laugh, the same sentence that sparked the bond. How can that be? Some say it's trauma, that the brain edits memory to protect us, that details get erased, swapped, rewritten. But what if the edit wasn't made by your brain, but by reality itself? There's a concept called reality convergence. It suggests that sometimes multiple timelines collapse into one, like folds of a paper being flattened. When that happens, pieces of memory survive the merge, but not all in the same order, not all in the same way. You get fragments from version A and version B, and your mind does its best to arrange them into something coherent. But when you compare with someone else who lived that moment, you find they've inherited a different fold, and now both of you are trying to agree on a past that never truly existed in one piece. So, you're left with questions. What if both memories are real in their own stream of time? What if time doesn't move forward in a straight line, but ripples, resets, loops, dragging your awareness through edits and rewrites. And what if these mismatched memories are the proof? The fingerprints left behind from a scene reshot without telling the actors. You look at your friend. They're confused too, frustrated. Not because they think you're lying, but because you aren't. You're both telling the truth. And that's what makes it so disturbing. Because now the story isn't about who's wrong. It's about which version of reality forgot its line. And worse, why was there a script in the first place? What force? What mechanism? What hidden hand is orchestrating these moments? Revising, redirecting, reshooting reality itself? Maybe you'll never know. Maybe the memory will fade, or you'll agree to disagree. But late at night, you'll still think about it, about the moment that slipped, the timeline that cracked, the feeling that somewhere buried in memory is a scene you almost shared, but never quite did, and the echo of a life that might have happened, but didn't. Getting lost to find something. You take the wrong turn. Maybe it's a missed exit, a dead GPS, a detour that reroutes you off course. Maybe you're walking, and a sudden impulse pulls you down a different path. At first, there's irritation, confusion, the uneasy feeling of not knowing where you are. But then, something happens. You find something you never intended to. Something you weren't looking for. A bookstore tucked behind ivy-covered walls. A person you'll never forget. A view that quiets every noise in your head. And just like that, being lost doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like the only way this could have happened. There's a strange beauty in getting lost. We treat it like failure, like a flaw in direction. But what if it's a hidden instruction? What if the path we're meant to walk refuses to appear unless we stray? Like reality is built with secret doors, only visible when you walk off the map. You weren't supposed to know where you were going. You were supposed to discover it. People tell these stories quietly, like they don't trust their own luck. A woman driving through the countryside in Ireland takes a wrong turn, ends up on a narrow road where she finds a tiny bed and breakfast. The owner, elderly and alone. They talk for hours. The woman later learns the owner passed away just days after her visit, and that she'd left behind a letter addressed to the lost girl who found me. The letter changes her life. She never forgets that road, or that detour. In Japan, a man on the way to an interview misses his train. Frustrated, he wanders through unfamiliar streets. He ends up sitting outside a ramen shop, and there, he sees a notice looking for a graphic designer. His actual passion, long buried beneath practical career choices. On a whim, he walks in. A year later, he's not just employed, he's thriving. The original interview, forgotten. The missed train, a beginning disguised as a setback. These aren't rare stories. They just don't fit the narrative we like to tell, that success is a straight line, that every step must be calculated, that control guarantees reward. But the truth, control is comforting, until it blinds you to the bigger game, the one that unfolds only when you're willing to lose your footing. There's an idea in psychology called serendipity, the art of finding valuable things you weren't looking for. But even that word feels too soft, because sometimes what you find isn't just valuable, it's essential. It rearranges you. It corrects the course of your life, not by design, but by accident, or what seems like accident. Some cultures believe the land itself speaks to us when we stray, that spirits or ancestors gently tug our direction, not to punish us, but to reveal. In Australia, Aboriginal songlines are invisible paths across the land, sung into existence by ancestors. Travelers who lose their way are not lost. They've been invited into a deeper story, one written in layers far beneath modern maps. Even modern science hints at something stranger. Our brains are wired to form patterns. But when we break routine, when we're lost, our minds become more open, more creative. In these moments of uncertainty, something primal activates. We notice more, feel more. It's like reality opens wider when we don't know what comes next. Have you ever had that moment? You wander through a new city. Your phone dies. You're suddenly alone. No idea where to go. And then you see it. A mural. A song playing from a window. A cafe you never would have chosen. But now, feels like home. The very thing your soul needed, placed exactly where you weren't planning to be. As if the universe said, you wouldn't have looked here, so I had to mislead you. And maybe it's not physical. Maybe you get lost emotionally, spiritually. You leave a relationship that once defined you, quit a job without a backup plan. Everything feels unmoored. But in that emptiness, you find a friend you would have never known, a talent you would have never explored, a version of yourself that would have stayed buried beneath routine. The fall wasn't failure. It was the only way through. There's a secret that maps don't tell you. They don't show wonder. They show borders, labels, safe paths. But life, real life, is wild, uncharted, alive. It moves beneath the roads and rises through cracks in the sidewalk. It hides what matters where you're least likely to look. So maybe next time you're lost, don't panic. Don't rush to recalculate. Let yourself drift. Let the silence guide you. Listen for something small and strange. Because maybe you're not lost at all. Maybe you're being led to something vital, something waiting. And it just needed you to forget where you were going long enough to arrive where you were meant to be. Feeling watched without cause. You stop, you turn, nothing. The street is quiet, no footsteps, no voices. But the feeling remains, thick, electric, unmistakable. That pressure on your neck, that ancient instinct screaming, you're being watched. And yet, there's no one, no eyes, just shadows, just stillness. Just you and that gnawing sense that something's watching from a place you can't quite find. It's not paranoia. It doesn't feel imagined. It feels placed, like a thread pulled too tight in the fabric of reality. Like someone set the scene but forgot to cast the observer. You scan the rooftops, the alleyways, the parked cars with dark windows. You tell yourself it's nothing, just nerves, stress, caffeine. But deep down, some primitive part of your brain isn't convinced. Because this isn't the first time. It happens too often. Alone in your room, in a hotel lobby, on a train, different places, same sensation, a script with a missing actor. Evolution tells us this feeling is a survival mechanism, an echo from days when predators stalked us in forests and open plains. The human brain developed acute sensitivity to gaze direction, capable of detecting when eyes were locked onto us even from peripheral angles. But now, in a world of glass and pavement and fluorescent lights, that skill hasn't vanished. It waits. And sometimes, it fires. Even when there are no eyes to be found. But what if it's not a malfunction? What if the feeling isn't wrong, but early? People who've experienced this know the pattern. You feel watched, then hours later someone shows up. Or you receive a message. Or you discover something was recording. Security cameras, mirrored windows, a forgotten lens. In those moments, you realize your body knew before your mind did. It felt the presence before logic could catch up. But there are stories even stranger. People who report feeling watched in forests, only to find animal tracks circling them. Hikers who turn around at the last minute, only to find hidden eyes peering through the trees. Children who suddenly go quiet and say, "He's looking at me," while playing alone in empty rooms. And then there are those times when there's no resolution. You feel the presence, and nothing ever follows. No confrontation, no reveal, just the echo. Like something forgot to make an entrance, like a surveillance camera panning across a stage that never got its actor. Could it be the mind reacting to silence? Some researchers suggest our brains are so uncomfortable with true isolation that they generate sensory impressions to simulate connection. But if that were true, why does the sensation feel so specific, so targeted? Not just someone watching, but someone specific, a distinct presence, a direction to the gaze. This is where the theories twist. Some say the feeling is psychic bleed, the leftover tension of someone thinking about you from afar, a kind of emotional pressure transmitted through invisible means. Others speak of glitches in reality, that every now and then, the simulation we live in forgets to hide the observer, and for one heartbeat, you sense it. A designer, a handler, a presence not meant to be felt. There are entire cultures with myths about this. Spirits who dwell at the edge of sight, shadow people who appear when you're close to knowing too much, entities that exist not to harm, but to witness, to record, to archive your choices. Because what if we're not alone, even when we're alone? What if every action is observed, not out of malice, but necessity? What if someone, or something, is writing your life down as you live it, and sometimes the pen gets too close? That feeling, that electric pause in your gut, might not be wrong. It might be you brushing up against a hidden camera in the set of your life. Not one you can see, one you can only feel. A shift in the scene that your intuition catches before your senses do. And maybe it's not always sinister. Maybe the watcher is you from another timeline, a memory bleeding back, a future you checking in, a version of yourself that stayed behind to make sure you made it out okay. Or maybe the feeling is there because someone should be there, and they're not. The missing actor, the abandoned script, the life that should have crossed yours today but didn't, and the tension in the air is the silence of an unsaid line, a gaze that never arrived, a story paused mid-scene. You're not crazy for noticing it. You're not broken for feeling it. Maybe you've just caught a glimpse behind the curtain. Not with your eyes, but with whatever deeper sense wakes up when the world forgets to keep pretending it's solid. So the next time it happens, don't ignore it. Don't laugh it off. Stand still. Breathe in. Let the silence speak. Because somewhere, in that electric moment of being watched by nothing, is a truth that refuses to stay hidden. Random strangers giving clues. You're standing there, lost in thought, a crossroads in your life, or maybe just a quiet moment soaked in uncertainty. You haven't said anything out loud, not to anyone. But then, out of nowhere, a stranger passes by and says something. A phrase, a sentence. So precise, so perfectly aligned with the question you've buried in your chest, that your breath catches. You turn to respond, to ask how they knew, but they're already gone, not slowly, not gradually, just vanished. As if they appeared only to say that one thing and nothing more. It's easy to dismiss at first, a coincidence, a trick of the mind, but it lingers, the timing, the content, the truth of it. It wasn't vague or general, it was surgical, exact, and it answered something you were too scared or too broken to speak aloud. You didn't even know you needed it until it was said. This isn't a rare story. People around the world report it. You're sitting in a coffee shop, wrestling with a life decision, and someone at the next table mutters something into their phone that hits you like a lightning bolt. Or you're walking down the street, drowning in grief, and an old man with tired eyes passes and says, "It wasn't your fault," before disappearing into the crowd. You've never seen him before. You never see him again. The rational mind wants to explain this away. We're pattern-seeking creatures. We project meaning. We hear what we want to hear. That's what psychologists will tell you, that you were primed to pick up any message that fits your internal conflict, and your brain connected the dots. But that doesn't explain how it always seems to come at the exact right time, or why the message often feels like it carries a weight beyond coincidence, as if it's not just luck, but orchestration. There are people who've had their entire lives changed by one sentence from a stranger. One woman was about to leave her job, convinced she was wasting her time. While waiting at a bus stop, a man beside her turned and said, "Don't quit just because it's hard. The impact comes later." She never said a word to him. She'd never seen him before, but she stayed. And a year later, the project she was building changed the lives of thousands. Another man was on the verge of ending his own life, sitting on a park bench, head down, silent. A child walked past him and said, "You're not invisible." That's it, just that. The man looked up. No one else was nearby. And when he looked back toward the child, they were gone. It was enough. He didn't jump. So, what's happening? Are we tapping into some shared consciousness? Is the universe speaking through people without them knowing? Some call it synchronicity, when events align in ways that feel deeply meaningful, though not causally connected. Carl Jung believed these moments were bridges between the inner world and the outer one, that when you're internally aligned with a question, the world outside responds. Not always with logic, but with message. Others believe in divine messengers, not glowing, winged figures, but ordinary people, unaware of their role, carriers of sentences, deliverers of clues. They don't know they've been used for something sacred. They don't stay. They don't even wait for a reaction. They just say it and move on, like it wasn't even their thought. But here's another possibility. Maybe your mind reaches out, quietly, urgently, without you knowing. Maybe your need sends ripples into the world, and somewhere, someone sensitive enough, open enough, picks up the signal. Maybe they don't know why they feel the need to say what they say, but they say it anyway. and then walk away, unaware that they've just rewritten someone else's life. And it raises the deeper question: how often have you been that stranger? Said something offhanded, unplanned, that stuck with someone forever? How many people carry your words like anchors or lanterns, never knowing your name, never seeing you again? That's the haunting beauty of these moments. They aren't repeatable. You can't chase them. You can't plan for them. They come in whispers, through mouths you don't recognize, and vanish before you can ask why. It's as if life occasionally pulls back the curtain, lets a little light through, and then closes it again just as fast. So the next time a stranger says something that hits too hard, too close, too true, don't dismiss it. Don't brush it off. Because maybe, just maybe, that wasn't a stranger. Maybe it was the universe. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was you, reaching through the silence, finally answering yourself. Signs appearing from nowhere. You say it out loud, maybe with a laugh. Maybe whispered. Maybe only half serious. Okay, universe, give me a sign. You don't expect anything. You don't really believe in that kind of magic. And then, it happens. Not hours later, not days, but seconds. A name you haven't heard in years appears on a billboard. A song starts playing. That song. A butterfly lands on your hand in the middle of a concrete parking lot. You stop breathing for a moment, because you didn't expect an answer. And now that it's here, it feels too perfect, too exact, too fast, as if something was already listening before you finished speaking. This is the strange reality of asking for signs. It's not about belief. It's about what happens despite your disbelief. The way the world answers with a kind of eerie choreography, delivering something so specific, so unlikely, that your rational mind goes silent. And for one breathless moment, you wonder if you accidentally summoned it. Psychologists might say this is just confirmation bias. You ask for a sign, and your brain gets hyper-attuned to its environment. You start seeing connections everywhere, attaching meaning to anything remotely relevant. But what if the thing that appears isn't subtle? What if it's so sharp, so undeniably tailored to your private thought, that it feels like something pulled it from your memory and placed it on stage? Consider Natalia, a woman in Sao Paulo, who was contemplating ending a long relationship. She looked up at the sky and said quietly, "Just give me a sign. Anything." Within seconds, her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. It said, "You deserve better. Don't settle." The number was never active again. No records, no explanation, just a message, delivered at the exact second she asked. Coincidence? Possibly. But stories like hers keep coming. People ask for signs as a joke or in desperation, and the world seems to respond. A man in Toronto asked for a sign on whether to leave his job. As he walked into work, a coworker passed by wearing a shirt that said, "Now is the time," not a brand, not a slogan. Just white letters on black cotton. No one had ever seen him wear it before. Are these moments fate? Algorithmic glitches in a simulated world? Echoes of your own energy boomeranging back through reality? Or is there something more ancient at play? In many spiritual traditions, asking for signs is an invocation, a sacred act. Not because it controls the universe, but because it aligns you with it. The moment you ask, you shift. Your awareness sharpens, your subconscious opens, and in that brief pause, the world bends. Not to serve you, but to reveal something it already knew you needed. But what's terrifying isn't that signs appear. It's that they sometimes appear too easily, as if the universe was waiting for permission, as if reality is not as solid as you think, but thin, fluid, reactive. There are people who swear they've asked for a specific animal, or color, or word, and received it in bizarre, cinematic fashion. A man once asked to see a fox if he should move cities. As he sat at a stoplight, a real fox crossed the intersection, in the middle of downtown, in the middle of the day. The next car over didn't react, but he saw it. He got the answer. Skeptics argue that the mind is always seeking patterns, and yes, humans are excellent at pulling order from chaos, but the timing of these events often defies that explanation. When you ask for a sign, and seconds later the exact name you were thinking appears carved into a tree, or said by a passing stranger, or blinking on a random ad, you're not just connecting dots. You're standing in the crosshairs of something else. There's even a theory in physics that every observation shapes the outcome of an event. That intention, mere thought, nudges probabilities. What if asking for a sign, even as a joke, alters the field around you just enough to create the illusion of an answer? Or maybe not an illusion, maybe a glitch, maybe a ripple, maybe a secret hand-pressing play. The real mystery isn't whether signs exist, it's what they mean. Are they affirmations from the universe? Warnings from the subconscious? Feedback from a reality more responsive than we dare admit? And what do you do when the sign comes? Do you follow it? Do you doubt it? Do you ask for another? Or do you simply sit there, breath caught in your throat, staring at the impossible answer that appeared the moment you whispered the question? Because you didn't really expect a response, and now that you have one, you can't unsee it. Maybe you summoned it. Maybe it was already coming. Maybe the universe doesn't speak often, but when it does, it speaks perfectly. And sometimes, all it takes is asking, even quietly, even half seriously, because somewhere, behind the curtain of what you call reality, something might still be listening. Overhearing your own story. You're sitting somewhere, on a train, in a cafe, walking through a store, and you catch fragments of a conversation, not directed at you, not even near you, just background chatter. But then your ears catch a sentence, a detail, a name, a memory, and suddenly you freeze. Because what they're saying isn't just familiar, it's yours. It mirrors your story, your history, your pain. The things you've told no one, or only whispered once in confidence. But here it is, spilling from strangers' mouths as if they'd been handed your biography and told to read it out loud. You don't move. You barely breathe. Because the logic of the moment collapses. How would they know? These are strangers. You've never met them. They don't know your face. And yet, they're echoing your memories like rehearsed lines. Coincidence, maybe. That's the first defense. That you're just hearing what you want to hear. Projecting. But the more you listen, the harder it is to write off. Because the details are too precise. The events too layered. Not just general themes, but specific timestamps of your life. Milestones, mistakes, moments that shaped you. They talk about someone who left, just like he did. Or the way a childhood room looked, down to the color of the walls. They mention a dream you used to have, a fear you never named, or a decision you still regret. And now the world feels suddenly porous, like your story bled out into the fabric of reality, and someone nearby picked up the transmission. What do you do in that moment? You listen, of course. Compelled, uneasy, caught between fascination and dread. Because if they're telling your story, who wrote it? This isn't imagination. It's not just pattern recognition. There are too many accounts, real ones, of people overhearing conversations that seem to reflect them with eerie precision, and not in vague horoscope-style ways, but in actual narrative structure, like scenes from their past are being read back to them without permission. There's a theory that memory isn't isolated, that our experiences leave imprints, not just in our minds, but in the environment, in collective awareness, that echoes of our lives continue to vibrate around us, waiting for someone tuned to the right frequency to stumble across them. What if those people aren't talking about you? What if they're channeling you? Or worse, what if your story is being rehearsed? Not remembered, not recited, but rehearsed, practiced, like a play, as if the world is getting ready to perform your next act, before you've lived it. It's not always sinister. Sometimes it feels like a message, like the universe is confirming you're not alone in your story, that somewhere others are living near the same rhythm, that your pain, your joy, your confusion, they aren't isolated. They're stitched into the background fabric of reality, replayed when you least expect it. But sometimes it feels like surveillance, like you're the only one who didn't get the script. Everyone else is in on something you're not. And their conversation, accidental or not, is a leak, a sliver of a larger mechanism you were never meant to hear. You begin to wonder how much of your story is truly yours, and how much is being observed, tracked, replicated. Some say it's a form of synchronicity, that when you're in alignment, or when your mind is raw, open, vulnerable, you become more receptive to the subtle patterns around you, like tuning into a frequency you didn't know existed. And what you hear then is less a coincidence, and more a reflection. But even then, the question remains, who's doing the reflecting? Is it your own subconscious feeding you truth through strangers' mouths? Or is there something larger, a structure behind the scenes, testing, prodding, responding? You leave the place eventually. You stop listening. But the words linger. The conversation repeats in your mind, like a riddle or a warning. Because deep down, you know what you heard. You know what it matched. You know. You weren't just overhearing a conversation. You were overhearing yourself, through strangers who should know nothing. And the silence afterward feels staged, like the scene ended, like the curtain dropped. And all that's left now is the question echoing in your skull. How long has my life been spoken aloud without me? Waking mid-dream realization. You're dreaming. Maybe you don't know it at first. You're just walking through a hallway that never ends, or standing in a city that doesn't exist. The rules are strange, but you follow them, until something breaks. A light flickers wrong. A stranger knows your name, and suddenly, you realize it. You're inside a dream. Your awareness flares like a match in the dark. You feel it all. The artificial texture of the sky, the false gravity, the sense that none of this is real. And then, right as the dream begins to spiral, right as something urgent is about to happen, you wake up. Your breath catches. Your room is quiet. Your heart is pounding. You're back. Or so you think. Then you notice it. Something tiny. Off. The same song from your dream is playing faintly on the radio. The same words the stranger said flash across your phone. You look out the window, and it's raining exactly like it did in that last moment. The smell in the air, the light, the way your cat turns to stare at you. All of it is a match, not similar, exact. As if your dream didn't end. It just bled through. It's not déjà vu. Déjà vu is a glitch of familiarity. This is something else. This is like getting a spoiler from your own subconscious, and then watching reality perform it on cue. You feel a chill, not just because the world is syncing up, but because you can't tell whether you woke up into your life, or into another layer of the dream. Psychologists call it a false awakening when you think you've woken up, but you're still dreaming. But what if you have woken, and something still isn't right? What if, for a moment, the dream and the real world were perfectly aligned? There are stories. A woman dreams of standing in an elevator with a man in a green jacket who says, "It's not over yet." She wakes up, shaken. That afternoon, she steps into a random elevator. A man in a green jacket steps in behind her. Same face, same words. Her knees nearly buckle. She never sees him again. A child dreams of running down a corridor with red walls, chased by something invisible. Wakes up terrified. Later that week, she visits a museum for the first time, gets separated from her class, ends up in a back hallway, painted deep red. She stops cold. The light, the shape, the air. It's identical. She doesn't run. She doesn't need to. She's already lived it. Are these coincidences? Are they fragments of memory scrambled and stitched together in dreams? Possibly. But then why do they so often come with meaning? Why does the matching moment hit with such intensity? Why does it feel like the dream was preparing you? Some theories suggest our subconscious processes patterns faster than we can comprehend, that our brains simulate possible futures during sleep, and sometimes, by chance, it gets one right. But by chance doesn't explain the detail, the dialogue, the emotion. Other theories go deeper, that dreams aren't fiction, they're transmission. From what or where, no one can say. That you are both the dreamer and the dreamed. That sleep thins the veil, and in that space, you see the rehearsal for what's next. Not because you're psychic, but because time isn't linear where dreams go. Think about it. In dreams, you feel the moment before it happens. You know when someone's behind the door. You know when something's about to break. That instinct doesn't vanish when you wake up. If anything, the moment of recognition, that flicker of, "I've seen this before," is your soul remembering the map. And maybe the dream is a test run. Maybe it's a version of you sending warnings backward through time. Or maybe the dream is the truth, and waking up is just stepping onto the stage that's already been scripted. Whatever the answer, the effect is the same. You wake up different. You trust yourself more, or fear yourself more, because something inside you knew, and now the world outside is catching up. So next time it happens, when your dream ends and the real world clicks into place like a second heartbeat, don't dismiss it. Don't call it weird and walk away. Sit in it. Watch closely. You may not have been asleep at all. You may have just been reading tomorrow's script, one layer ahead of time.